Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the MHA What If, with another fanfiction. This is the first part of What If Deku Had a True Friend. All credits for this video go to their respective authors, so please support the real author. Check out the link in the description for more details. Please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. There are many lessons one can learn in life. Some learn the hard ones earlier than most, while others can go their whole lives not learning at all. All men are not created equal. That was the lesson Izuku Midoriya learned at the young age of 4. You see, he is what in his world one would call quirkless. If you don't know what that is, then let's have a quick little history lesson. It all started over a century ago to the present day at the early decades of the second millennia. The Great Plague of the 21st century had ended, and the world was slowly building itself back up. However, in the old city of Qingqing, China, a child was born with luminescent properties. In other words, a child was born that glowed. While they didn't know it then, this was just one of many children that would be born with a quirk. From that day forward, the rate of children showing never-before-seen meta abilities only continued to grow. Back then, all of the world's governing parties had to work around the clock to get even a slimmer of order back into their countries. Law reformations, safeguards. The shift in the paradigm caused severe backlash, and it sent scared and confused people around the world into a frenzy. Even worse, while governments tried to regain order, a select few individuals began to use their new powers for their personal gain. Banks were emptied out, riots ensued, cults started, civil war was just on the horizon, and many were only one bad day away from death. However, the explosive increase in crime did not sit well with some, and they could not sit back and watch as their world began to burn and innocent people were hurt. So those people began to fight back. Small in number, and not always backed by a power, people used what they could to fight off the rising chaos that they saw and keep their communities safe. These were the first heroes, the vigilantes. And as time passed on, with their help, the world was able to regain a sense of order and peace. A shaky sense of peace, but it was stable enough. It was then that the governments decided to recognize what the vigilantes had done for them and offered all who wanted it an official position in law enforcement under the eye of the government. Many agreed, happy with what they were doing, and eventually, it led to the establishment of heroes, an industry that would one day become the cornerstone of their new society. Hero, however, didn't always mean having a quirk. Not all vigilantes had quirks. They had a feeling in their heart to protect and put ease into the hearts of others. Society seemed to forget this fact and thought only those with power could be a hero. That's why quirkless Izuku Midoriya was always picked on and outcasted. An ignorant world had lost its meaning of what a real hero was. Izuku wanted to be a hero more than anything. Ever since that day that he saw All Might on TV. The symbol of peace saved people, made them feel safe, all with a smile on his face. It would be an understatement to say Izuku wanted to be even half of what that man was. He wanted to be able to save people. Even if it was just one person, Izuku Midoriya wanted to be someone's hero. Today, he was. Izuku was at the playground, and was currently standing in front of a boy with curly black hair who was crying on the floor. Across from him stood someone he once thought as his friend and 2 others. "You can't do this, Kaken," Izuku shouted, spreading his arms out with a shaky but defiant look. "It's not right." Bakugo scoffed at his old friend's attempt at heroism and looked at him with clear disgust. "Trying to be a hero, Deku?" The other 2 boys that followed him around laughed. "Just get out of our way. That curly-haired new kid thinks he can just walk into our turf and think he's better than us because he's got a rare quirk." "No, I don't," the black-haired boy in question shouted before cowering back down immediately at the blonde's death stare. "I don't." Izuku, however, still stood strong. "Kaken, if you use your quirk to hurt people, then you're no better than a villain." The greenette immediately wished he had phrased that better as his old friend's face immediately adopted a scowl. What I mean is, "What the hell did you just call me?" Bakugo yelled. "Stupid Deku." He punched his fist together, and a small explosion ignited. On the blonde's sides, one of his followers grew a pair of wings, while the other elongated his fingers. As soon as Bakugo rushed forward, they followed suit and, well, you can use your imagination. After his beating, Izuku continued to simply lie on the ground. It wasn't anything bad. God knows he had gotten worse from the blonde. But it still hurt, nonetheless. His pain, however, was ultimately overcome by confusion as the boy he was defending hadn't left. Looking over to him, the greenette saw he had tears in his eyes as he looked right at him. "Why'd you do that?" the black-haired boy asked, sniffing and wiping away his tears. Why'd you take that beating from me? Izuku stared back at him before shrugging. You didn't deserve to be hurt by Kaken just because he doesn't like you. He sighed before sitting up. Better me than you. The other boy looked at him with confusion written all over his face, but quickly shook it off. He hesitated before sticking out his hand. My name is Akira Hikaru. Huh? Izuku looked at the hand with a tilted head and a sort of lost expression. You want to talk to me? He asked, bewilderment the most evident tone in his voice. Yes, Akira's statement was delivered with confusion as he also tilted his head and pulled his hand away. Is there something wrong with that? Izuku gulped before dropping his head. I'm quirkless. He failed to hold back the tears that began to build in his eyes. You don't have to pretend to like me. The black-haired boy tilted his head at his savior's statement. What? He asked, his confusion continuing to grow. You saved me from the mean boom boom boy. I don't care if you're quirkless, I want to be your friend. Akira watched the other boy's eyes widen and he sighed. Let's try this again. His hand once more stuck out again and he smiled. I'm Akira Hikaru. Izuku looked at the hand for a few moments before he shook off his surprise and grabbed at it with his own teary smile. Izuku Midoriya. That was the day Izuku made his first real friend. And on that day, the rushing river that was his life changed course. His future was forever changed. Aldera, 10 years later. Okay, I can make it, I can make it, I can make it, Izuku said as his legs moved as fast as they could towards his school. Move faster, legs. But apparently not fast enough for him. The greenette didn't mean to be cutting it as close as he was, but he didn't really think it was his fault. He wasn't 5 minutes out of his house when some random purse snatcher with a giant quirk had begun rampaging at Tatooine Station. His fanboy side had immediately kicked in, and he couldn't stop himself from going to see it. Usually, Akira would have been there to stop him and drag right on to school, but the black-haired teen was having a rare sick day. As soon as Izuku arrived at the scene, the villain had already been engaged by multiple of Musatafu's local heroes. The punching hero, Death Arms, the firefighter hero, Backdraft, and a few others were holding off the collateral damage the giant was causing and keeping the civilians safe. The real star of the show, though, was the one who swung in on branches of wood, Kamui Woods. He was a relatively new hero, young but quickly making his way up the polls with his efficient work and heavy amount of charisma. His arrival on the scene started a cheer from the gathered crowd, and it only grew as the tree man swung around the giant and made a fool out of him. Quippy lines that were sure to be in a comic book or cartoon show exited his mouth every time he spoke, and it just made the people love him more. However, just as Kamui went to charge up his special move and finish off the giant, another giant arrived on the scene with a kick. The figure was a blur at first, but when they lost momentum and the dust settled, it was clear that the one who had defeated the villain was a giant woman. Paparazzi immediately found themselves at the site, and the giant woman revealed herself to be a brand new hero that was just debuting, Mount Lady. With this new information, Izuku knew that he'd have to update his hero catalog and check the hero news board for her. In doing so, however, he also saw that he only had 5 minutes left until the first bell rang for his class. And that caught us up to present with Izuku running far faster than any normal person should have been capable of without a strength or speed quirk, and jumping across the buildings with the Parker skills of a veteran of the sport. The greenette really had Akira to thank for that, though. Growing up quirkless obviously had its challenges, daily discrimination and physical violence being one of them. To combat this, Akira had taken it upon himself to defend Izuku the same way the greenette had protected him on the day of their meeting. That eventually turned into teaching Izuku to defend himself in a martial art they had both mastered, Shaolin Kung Fu. A simple martial art, but one that turned both Izuku and Akira into the strong teens they were today. And while no dojo had actually taken Izuku in, all due to his quirkless status, Akira showed everything he learned to his friend, and the greenette took to it like a fish in water. The black-haired teen could honestly say his friend was an advanced red belt in the art. Izuku's analytical nature was really what helped him advance so fast, and that was eventually cultivated into a strategic mind with an affinity for battle. ****. Yes, Izuku mentally cheered as he arrived at his class door. And the teacher's always late, so I'm here with 2 minutes to spare. He smiled at what he hoped was a good start to his day. Oi, broccoli head. The rough voice of Izuku's favorite Pomeranian invaded his ears, and the greenette turned around to see Bakugo walking up to him, slouched over as always. Get out my way, I'm trying to get to class. Izuku hesitantly stepped out of the way and averted his eyes from Bakugo out of annoyance more than fear. Right? Sorry, Bakugo. He mentally kicked himself for his stutter. Damn it, not again. While things had definitely improved over the Greenette's life, Katsuki Bakugo had remained a negative constant. Well, not a complete negative. He mostly stuck to ignoring him and being constantly annoyed by his presence. The blonde had also stopped calling him Deku after the Greenette beat up one of his cronies. Stupid nerd, giving me a damn headache. Bakugo muttered underneath his breath as he took his seat, ignoring the greetings of all the extra his classmates in favor of laying his head down and going to sleep. Well, at least I'm off to an okay start, Izuku thought to himself, unknowingly challenging the universe. Today shouldn't be too bad. Some random underpass, after school. The universe has it out for me, Izuku thought, while walking home. And he wasn't really wrong. Class had been going relatively well for most of the day, and the Greenette actually thought he might actually make it through a day without Akira unscathed. However, at the start of their final period, their teacher had handed out the class's career forms, and indirectly, though the malicious intent was there, called Izuku out for wanting to be a hero. The man's proclamation got the response he wanted, and the children laughed. The real damage, though, was done at the end of the day. Seriously, who tells people to kill themselves and think they can be a hero? Izuku took Bakugo's insults with a grain of salt. But still, what a dickhead. And I am not a statistic waiting to happen. In his head, he was actually a little glad that Akira wasn't with him today. They had basically become like brothers throughout the years, and with his help, they kept a respectful and safe distance away from Bakugo and he to them. If he was here today, Izuku feared the school would have been torn down from their fight. Ugh. Izuku's every thought halted as the ground beneath him began to shake, and the strange sounds of slushing echoed throughout the underpass. The Greenette turned around quickly to the source of the noise, and found a large amalgamation of sewage shooting out of a sewer grate. It didn't take long before the sludge began to shift around and take a monstrous form, and two yellow eyes quickly presented themselves before locking onto Izuku's form. Well. The sludge started in a chilling tone. A medium-sized bodysuit. It smiled, revealing a row of perfectly yellow teeth. You'll do perfectly. Before two sludge tentacles suddenly shot out of his body towards Izuku. Now, while Izuku hadn't a clue in the world what was happening, he did know that just one of those tentacles were several crimes waiting to happen. Unenthusiastic of becoming a part of the statistics his class had always told him he'd become, the Greenette threw his bag far away before dodging to the left. He repeated this action several more times as the sludge continued to try and grab at him, eventually earning himself a very frustrated look. Stop dodging, you little shit. The sludge yelled, what Izuku thought was panic lacing its tone. I don't have time for this. He'll be here soon. Whatever the sludge villain said was drowned out by a loud laugh, and the sewer grate from before smashing the bridge above them. Ha ha ha, I am here, a loud voice called. Nah. Both Izuku and the sludge villain slowly turned around to the new arrival, and they both adopted different expressions. There was the shared feeling of shock, though. Standing there, in all his glory, was, holy crap, it's All Might, Izuku said in an excited tone. Holy crap, it's All Might. The sludge's tone, however, was much more fearful. All Might observed the situation in front of him and frowned. Attacking children. A chill ran down the sludge's spine at the sheer power the man's mere voice exerted. You're the worst kind of villain. His statement was delivered with his fist reeling far back. Now, the sludge villain felt a little insulted here, thinking that there were several crimes that could be deemed worse than child murder. However, he didn't get to defend himself, which would have been in vain anyway, as All Might sent his fist forward with a mighty roar. Texas smash. The large blonde's fist shot forward at bullet speeds, and a wild torrent of wind shot out with it, turning the sludge into nothing but sewage on the tunnel walls. Izuku watched the display of power with wide eyes, and no short sense of awe. Oh my stars, that was so cool. He was cut by his thoughts, though, as he saw All Might standing in front of him. Are you all right, young man? The symbol of peace asked, a strong yet calming presence surrounding him as he knelt. That villain didn't hurt you, did he? Izuku took deep, slow breaths before he answered. No, All Might, sir. I'm perfectly fine. Internal Izuku was currently screaming, and shaking another internal Izuku, who was also screaming. All Might nodded before he got back up and started to pick off the sludge villain from the wall before placing them inside two bottles he happened to be carrying. I'm truly sorry, young one. I didn't mean to get you involved in my crime fighting, but this city's sewer system is quite difficult to navigate, he stated with a sheepish expression. Izuku shook his head furiously at the man's apology. It's fine, All Might, sir," the brunette said quickly. "All Might? Apologize to me? Never." All Might chuckled lightly at the tense and serious expression on the teen's face. "Haha, there's no need to call me sir, young." Izuku stiffened. "Izuku Midoriya, All Might." The large man finished picking up the sludge villain, and the brunette remembered something. Quickly fishing a pen and a notebook out of his bag, Izuku opened it to a page dedicated to All Might. "See, could I get your autograph?" he asked, hope in his eyes. All Might laughed loudly and took the book and pen. Of course. While signing, the man decided to discreetly skim the page's contents and was very impressed. This is pretty in-depth stuff. I'd expect something of this detail from David or Knight." He cut off his own thoughts as he felt a strong sting in his side, and he quickly handed the notebook back to Izuku before securing his bottles of sludge. "Thank you so much, All Might," Izuku exclaimed, unaware of the physical internal turmoil the man was going through. "I'll treasure this forever." The large blonde laughed one last time at the brunette's attitude. "Well, I've got to get this fella down to the police so they can take care of him," All Might said as he crouched down. "Stay out of trouble, young Midoriya, and have a good day." His statement, however, sent Izuku into a state of panic. Wait, he can't be leaving already. I need to ask him a question. What happened next was quite possibly one of the dumbest things Izuku had ever done. An act so stupid that he'd be reminded of it far into his future. He grabbed right on to All Might's leg as he took off. Holy crap, we're flying. The severity of his own actions hit Izuku immediately, and he started mentally screaming. Oh, actually, the wind feels really nice up here. The feeling of the air hitting his face, however, quickly served to calm him down. Looking down at his legs, All Might saw Izuku latching on to his leg. "Kid, what are you doing?" he asked, shock and what almost sounded like nervousness lacing his tone. "I love my fans, but this is too much, let go." Izuku looked at his hero incredulously before shaking his head violently. "Absolutely not. I'll die from this height," he shouted, almost appalled at the large blonde's suggestion. All Might adopted a sheepish expression. "Oh right, hang on then. I'll find a building for us to land on." His eyes trailed below him, and he picked out a good space to land before angling his body. Damn it. As he did so, he had to quickly wipe away a small trail of blood coming out of his mouth. Not good. The worst part was something he hadn't noticed yet. The sludge bottles were no longer in his pocket. Izuku's flying trip eventually ended, and he found himself missing the feeling of rushing through the air. That was a lot more fun than I thought it would be. It was like Parker but faster, he thought, not at all worried about how close he was to death in that moment. Man, I wish I could fly. That wasn't a very smart move, young man. However, he couldn't think on that for long as All Might walked up to him and shook his head. You could have gotten seriously hurt just then. His tone was firm, and he spoke with authority. Bang on the door, someone will answer eventually. He began to walk away, but Izuku stopped him. Please no, the brunette pleaded, getting in front of All Might faster than the man expected. Please don't go yet. I have a really important question I want to ask. His eyes closed, and he looked to the ground, missing All Might's body beginning to emit steam. So, this is how I'm found out. The symbol of peace thought, nodding his head in reluctant acceptance. By a random superfan on top of a random, building on my 5th anniversary of receiving this scar. His thoughts turned sour at the end. Can I be a hero without a quirk? Izuku asked as a trail of blood ran down All Might's mouth. All my life, people have told me to give up on being a hero. Give up on living. Not even my mother believes in me. The large blonde was slowly becoming skinnier. The only person who thinks I'm not worthless is my best friend, Akira. So, please tell me, can I be a hero? He finally opened his eyes and looked in front of him, only to find All Might had disappeared. Ooh, in place of where the #1 hero had stood, was instead a skinny, frail blonde surrounded by steam. Silence immediately set in, and the gaunt blonde was actually grateful for it. At least he's not screamy. His body cut off his thoughts as he coughed out blood violently. Ah, all right, that got Izuku screaming. Of course. The skinny man grumbled. Jinxed it. Izuku started shaking lightly. Who are you? Where did All Might go? What did you do to him? He finally met the other man's eyes and his mouth stopped before his brain could tell it to. Those eyes, shadowed and sunken eyes, yet they shone a bright blue like a light of hope in the dark. It is him. These eyes didn't belong to anyone else. All Might? Yeah, it's me. The blonde sighed, wiping away the blood as he sat down. The Great All Might. A tired tone laced his voice before his face turned serious. I'm trusting you not to tell a soul about this, okay? He said with a tone that sent a shiver down Izuku's spine. Yes, sir. The Greenette exclaimed with a bow before reluctantly looking back up. Could I? He tried not to shrink when the man looked at him. Could I ask how you got like this? All Might just nodded and lifted up his shirt, revealing an incredibly large scar that almost made Izuku hurl. I got this bad boy from a fight 5 years back. He started, carefully running his other hand along it. My stomach is about a third of the size it used to be, and one of my lungs can barely work. A sigh escaped him before he put his shirt back down. I can only be a hero for about 3 hours a day at most. Then I'm back to being this. Unbeknownst to him, his explanation had sent Izuku into a news storm, where he brought up every single fight of All Mights he could remember that could create an injury that severe. Several articles in the daily newspaper, and the symbol of Peace's own sub-board sprung to the front of his mind clear as day, and he began to search for something big. Nope. He got nothing. Was the fight you got that injury from covered up? So Izuku just decided to ask, surprising his hero with his sudden question. I'm a big hero nerd. I've got basically every single major fight you've had in the past 10 years in my head, and even if I go beyond that, there isn't a single battle that could have caused that. The gaunt blonde chuckled, ignoring the blood that dripped out of his mouth, and nodded. Yeah, spot on. I made sure the world wouldn't know of the man who gave me this scar. He could see the question in the teen's eyes and sighed again. I'm the guy that smiles without fear, kid, this world's immovable pillar. If the thought of me being hurt, especially this bad, got out, well, you're smart. Yeah, I get what you mean, Izuku said, nodding. Villains would probably start to get more confident and bide their time building up their forces in the shadows. Old movements like the Meta-Liberationists and the Purity Guard could also possibly come back knowing that you were on your last legs. Though extremely taken off guard by the Greenette's extensive knowledge of the world's political state, All Might ignored it and nodded. I try to smile to show others that everything's going to be fine, but it's just a brave face I put on. This job isn't easy. He looked back at Izuku and stood up. You asked me if you could be a hero without a quirk. I'm sorry to say this. His back straightened and his eyes became soft. But some villains just can't be beaten without power. The implication of the man's words hit Izuku like a truck, and he felt his world shatter around him. What? Heroes aren't the only professions in law enforcement, though, if you want to save people. All Might quickly tried to salvage the situation and the sight of the boy's broken face. Police officers and firefighters do good honest work. I saw your notebook. You could be a good consultant, quirk analyst, even a doctor if you tried. He knelt and put his hands on the Greenette's shoulder. It's good to have dreams, young man, but you have to be realistic. Izuku looked into the man's eyes and shakily nodded, his mind hollow. I understand. He watched as his hero stood up and walked away, leaving him with one last look of pity. It was only then that he fell to his knees. I worked so hard. I trained so much. The Greenette simply knelt there for a while, taking in everything that had happened that day before standing up to leave. However, just before he did, an explosion caught his ears. His eyes shifted immediately to the source, and he could spot a large smoke cloud forming. Izuku went to move towards it, but stopped himself as he remembered All Might's words. With a sigh, he walked over to building edge. And then he jumped. Izuku fell for a bit before he caught himself on the wall of the other building. His hand gripped onto a pole before he started jumping back and forth between the walls until he was on the ground. He didn't really register in his mind the strength and skill needed to safely execute what he just did, and instead began his trek home. However, after a small bit of walking, he soon found himself in the presence of a large crowd. Right. My legs must have brought me here on reflex, Izuku thought as his body began to unconsciously check his surroundings. Wait a minute. The smell of burnt sugar, however, was enough to snap him out of his daze. These explosions, his face morphed into one of horror, and the Greenette rushed through the crowd before he was able to see the familiar figure of his longtime bully and the sludge villain. Wasn't All Might chasing this guy earlier? One of the crowd members asked. All Might, really? Another inquired, looking around with hope in their eyes. Where is he? Oh my stars. The murmur of the crowd reached Izuku's ears, and he quickly came to the conclusion of the sludge's escape. When I jumped on All Might, this is all my fault. This is all my fault. Unbeknownst to the Greenette, the symbol of peace was actually in the crowd with him, and had very similar thoughts. I was lecturing that kid earlier about what it takes to be a hero, and I can't even fix a problem like this. Pathetic. The growing worry of the crowd made the two's thoughts even worse, and they looked to the local heroes for some semblance of hope. Damn it, my quirk is no good for this. I can't fit into the alleyway. I'm too busy fighting off the fires from the kids' explosions. My quirk isn't suited to this situation, and immediately felt dread set in stone. Izuku looked back to Bakugo and hated seeing the struggle that the blonde was having with the sludge. Even with all the animosity between them, he'd never wish this fate on him. However, they both suddenly locked eyes and the world seemed to stop for the both of them. For Katsuki Bakugo, he saw the eyes of someone beneath him staring at him in what had to be the weakest position he had even been in. He felt frail, pathetic, vulnerable. For Izuku Midoriya, he saw past the many complex emotions swirling in his old friend's eyes and focused on only one. He could see the fear in Bakugo's eyes. They were screaming for help. And before he knew it, Izuku had dropped his bag and started surging towards Bakugo and the sludge villain. Hold on, I'm doing what now? Stop, you idiot, Death Arms shouted. What are you doing? Get back here, kid. Kamui Woods tried to reach him, but the fire started to flare and his arms flinched back. Damn it. The shout of the heroes alerted the sludge villain of something happening, and he paused his hostile takeover to see Izuku running towards him. Annoyance immediately set in. Not this little shit again, he spouted before shooting forward 3 tentacles towards his emerald assailant. Again? The crowd and heroes thought collectively. From his place in the sludge, Bakugo mimicked the crowd's thoughts' confused look. Again. Damn it. Legs, please stop moving. You're going to get us killed. Izuku tried to reason with the lower half of his body, but as always it decided to work on its own timetable. Screw it, realizing that, and seeing the incoming tentacles, the greenette decided to just roll with what life gave him. It's worked pretty well so far. Izuku's eyes shifted to a long, broken pipe lying on the ground and quickly slid under 2 tentacles to grab it before flipping over to the left, dodging another tentacle. He quickly got his bearings and his legs shot him forward before he jumped left again, running up the alley's wall before jumping towards the other one when a volley of tentacles came at him. One more tendril struck out at him mid-air, but Izuku twisted and batted it away before landing on the other wall and jumping towards the sludge. Ah, my fucking eye. And landing a square hit on its eye. The hit had its effect and Bakugo was given his much-needed breath of air. You sludge fuck, I'll kill you, before being immediately sunk back into the sewage cluster. Izuku, however, was already back up in the air for another attack, and with much more height and therefore power. Rag! The greenette struck downwards and hit the sludge's right eye so hard that it flew off alongside a portion of its face. Ah, damn you, you little shit! The sludge jerked back further, and Bakugo managed to force both of his arms out. Upon seeing this, Izuku rushed forward directly at the sludge before reaching out to the blonde's arms. An act that did not sit well for said Pomeranian. What the hell are you doing here, nerd? Bakugo barked, keeping a tight grip on Izuku. I don't need your help. Don't pull that crap, Kaken. Izuku saw the blonde's eyes widen, but continued to pull as hard as he could. Your eyes. They were screaming for help, and I just moved. He looked at his old friend and smiled his wide smile. So, I guess I'm sorry, but I'm not letting you die if I can do something about it. All Might felt those words hit him like a freight train. This kid. The gaunt man started to steam as he felt something deep within the core of his power pulse outwards and reached towards the greenette. Back to the actual fight. Izuku had already pulled most of Bakugo out from the sludge's hold, but he saw the villain regaining its bearings. Luckily, the blonde also saw this and let go of one of Izuku's arms to turn around and let loose an explosion that forced him out of the sludge for good. Bakugo was not, however, ready for being thrown back several meters like he was a ragdoll when Izuku pulled him out. Og. The blonde hit the pavement hard, but quickly rolled back up and got himself into a crouching position before rolling his shoulders. The fuck was that? Forget taking over someone else's body. The sludge villain made its pleasure known and raised itself up to full height before sending out another flurry of tentacles. I'm going to murder you. His tone of voice really sold that he was going to. In response to this, Izuku had picked up another pipe and was quickly batting off and dodging around multiple tentacles while moving backwards. Seeing the greenette in trouble, Bakugo had gotten up and against both his own wishes and the wishes of the present heroes started blasting away any tentacle that got too close to Izuku. Back off, sludge fuck, the blonde shouted. using his explosions to both dodge and destroy a number of tentacles coming at both him and the greenette. The sludge fucking question, seeing that none of its attacks were working, retracted its tentacles before growing to full height and reeling its entire body back. "You're dead now, kids." However, before anyone could move, before the sludge could finish his attack, and before Izuku and Bakugo could block, a large blur entered the fight scene. And when everyone looked up to see what had saved the teens, they could only look on in awe. "All Might?" Izuku asked, shock but mostly confusion lacing his voice. "Isn't he on a time limit?" "I really am pathetic," All Might said as he lifted up the sludge. "I told you the traits of a true champion, and yet, I haven't lived up to those ideals." He reeled his fist back. "A hero always risks their lives for the innocent with everything we have. That's our job." The sludge villain knew it was useless to do anything but went for a suicide attack. "Damn you, All Might," said Blonde smiled widely before throwing his fist forward. Detroit Smash. Pure, unadulterated power. That was the only way you could describe what All Might possessed. The wind pressure from that single attack temporarily created a tornado so great that it visibly shot up all the way into the sky, and Mount Lady had to shield the crowd with her body. After the small bout of fierce winds ended, the sky began to change and small droplets of water fell over the crowds. "It's raining," one of the crowd members said in astonishment. Death Arms looked up in the sky to see a large cluster of clouds spiraling exactly above where All Might stood. Holy crap. His arms dropped to his sides, and he felt as though his muscles were deflating. He changed the weather with a single punch. The small droplets then soon turned to rain, and it was like the sky itself was crying in amazement at the display of power the symbol of peace showed. "Yeah, All Might." A cheer immediately rose from the crowd, and everyone else followed suit and cheered with them. That cheer turned into a roar of applause when All Might shot his fist up in the air in victory. And during all that, the two teens he saved could only stare at their society's pillar with the exact same thoughts. "He's so cool." Later, the heroes quickly tried to make themselves useful after All Might dispatched of the sludge villain, and were able to get him contained just as police arrived on the scene. Izuku and Bakugo were both pulled aside, and were equally reprimanded for running in to fight the villain and praised for their bravery and skill. The greenette was even able to get Kamui Woods and Death Arms to sign his notebook. After that was over, Izuku wanted to go and apologize to All Might, but quickly found that he was blocked off by a sea of reporters and cameras. Paparazzi will be paparazzi. How do they always get here so fast though? But it still stumped Izuku. Most of those news agencies are from different prefectures. Hell, one of them was from Hokkaido. "Hey, nerd!" Bakugo's voice cut through the greenette's thoughts, and he stopped moving. "Turn around and look at me." Doing so, Izuku sighed. "Yes, Bakugo." The blonde didn't say anything, and simply started walking before stopping a few feet away from Izuku, an angry look on his face. "Listen here, you damn nerd. I didn't need your help back there. I was doing just fine on my own." His angry look changed to hesitation, and he shoved his hands in his pockets. "But, thank you though." Immediately making Izuku do a double take. "W what?" The greenette stuttered out his question in shock more than fear. "Did you just say?" "I said thank you," Bakugo shouted, cutting Izuku off. "That doesn't mean you aren't still a useless fuck though." With that said, he walked away, leaving behind a confused Izuku. Said teen stood there for 2 minutes, failing to process what happened. What emotions am I supposed to be feeling right now? Today had been a roller coaster, more than usual anyway. At least things couldn't get any crazier. I am here. Never mind. All Might? Izuku almost fell over himself as he stepped backwards in surprise. "Why are you here? How'd you escape the reporters?" He really wanted the answer to the last question the most. "Because I am the embodiment of justice. I am All Might." The large blonde was cut off as he started to cough violently, blood leaking out of his mouth. I really need to start carrying around tissues." He looked back to Izuku after taking care of himself and stood up straight. "Young man, I'm here to thank you. I'm also here to talk to you about the question you had earlier. If you hadn't told me about yourself, then I would have just been another bystander watching. So, thank you." Izuku rubbed the back of his neck. "There's nothing to thank me about." He suddenly became downcast. "It was my fault he escaped in the first place. I only got in the way. I'm not finished." All Might cut Izuku off before he could degrade himself. "You told me you didn't have a quirk, so when I saw you run down that alley and do some pretty kick-ass moves, I was inspired." The greenette looked at All Might in surprise. There are stories about every hero, how they became great. Most have one thing in common: their body moved before they had a chance to think. Izuku's eyes widened. That's what I saw today, young man. You too can become a hero. The inner Izukus were currently trying to fight back all the tears that were threatening to spill out of his eyes. Which is why I've deemed you worthy to inherit my power. Waha? Waha. Izuku repeated the author's reaction. The inner Izukus were working overtime to process what All Might said. Inherit your power? The sight of the teen's face drooping and his eyes becoming glazed was a bit too much for All Might, and he laughed. Ha ha ha. You should see your face right now, he exclaimed. Listen well, young man. My power is a torch that has been passed down through generations. I am the 8th wielder of this power. All Might stuck his hand out and rainbow light emitted from his hand. Its name is One for All. One for all, Izuku slowly repeated, awestruck and staring at the rainbow lights. Inwardly, he could feel something deep within him stretch out to that light. He could also feel the inner Izukus in his brain, trying to get his body moving again. Have I taken a breath yet? Yes, it is this cultivated power that has allowed me to save people. All Might explained. It's what allowed me to become a hero, and I want to give you that same opportunity. But why would you want to give me this power? Izuku asked, head sagging downwards as his thoughts spiraled into a hole of darkness. What if I can't do any good with it? The symbol of peace laughed once more, but this time it was soft, and he knelt down to meet Izuku eye to eye. Young man, today, when you ran through the fire and chaos all because you saw someone who needed help, you solidified in my mind that you deserve to be a hero. He placed a hand on Izuku's shoulder before standing up. For some time now I've been looking for a successor. Now, I've found you. All Might held out his arm. Do you accept? Luckily for the great pillar of peace, Izuku's body decided at that moment. It needed to work again, and Izuku quickly bowed. Yes, All Might, sir. I accept your offer. All Might chuckled lightly. No hesitation, that's good. Meet me at Takoba Beach in 2 days. The man began to walk off, but Izuku stopped him after the inner Izukus had finished processing the whole day. Wait, All Might, can I bring someone tomorrow? Izuku asked. All Might looked at him skeptically. This power is supposed to be a secret. I know you won't tell, but I don't think I can trust anyone else with this. There was clear hesitation in his tone, but the brunette continued his request. Please, sir, Izuku pleaded. He's my best friend. Without him, I don't even know if I'd still have the will to keep living. Though morbid, it was true. And I think he might be able to help you as well. He finished. All Might, while concerned for his new successor's mental health, was intrigued. In what way? He asked. Izuku just ran his hand over the left side of his own body, and All Might's eyes widened. The sheer thought of being whole again pulled him in, and he quickly found himself nodding. All right then, I'll see you and your friend in 2 days, young Midoriya. With that, they both walked off. Their futures changed and forever intertwined with one another. Izuku had one thought on his mind though. How am I going to explain this to Mom? Takoba Beach, 2 days later. All right, let me just. Akira sighed as he pinched the bridge of his nose. I'm sorry. Standing in front of him stood both an embarrassed Izuku and a deflated All Might. I leave you alone for one day, and you somehow manage to land yourself as the successor of quite possibly the world's greatest hero and gain a quirk. Izuku nodded slowly as he scratched at the back of his head sheepishly. I mean, I haven't gotten the quirk yet, but... The chuckle that escaped him was obviously forced. Yeah, that's kind of what happened. And he was fiddling with his hands. And there is one more thing. Another sigh drawled out of the black-haired boy as he ran a hand down in his face. Really? Information bomb of the century, and you decided to leave something out? He shook himself and stood up straight. Well, what is it? The brunette stepped backwards, and All Might, my God. He looks like a strong wind can blow him over, stepped upwards before putting his hand on the hem of his shirt. Now, fair warning. All Might started, putting one hand up. This is going to be very graphic. Please, I can handle a little. Akira immediately cut himself off, and he choked on the air as the gaunt blonde revealed his scar. What the hell? He held his stomach as he felt bile rising up to his throat. Izuku, lead with that. Izuku continued to awkwardly stand back and rub his neck in embarrassment. Yeah, He shook his head and stood forward. I know it takes a lot out of you, but could you try? Akira, though still shocked beyond belief, nodded his head. Yeah, of course. He signaled for All Might to kneel and held his hand out over the scar, a light golden glow emanating from it. What happened? Typical hero work. A great battle against a major force of darkness. The symbol of peace answered nonchalantly. My stomach is all but gone and my lungs are basically broken. Yeah, typical. Akira mocked as his hand's glow got a bit brighter, and he placed it over the man's lungs. There is so much wrong here. He scrunched his nose as he felt out the man's organs inside. A noise that didn't fill Izuku with much hope. Do you think you can do it? The brunette asked. I'm sorry if this is asking a lot, but… Izuku, calm down. The black-haired teen shut down his friend's tangent before he could start with a hand. I'm not going to lie, this is big. He stressed as much as he could how severe the injury was. But if we both gave up a big portion of our energy… Izuku heard the implication and instantly nodded. I'm fine with it. He walked behind his friend before turning to put his hand on his shoulder. Are you? Akira laughed before placing his hand over the brunette's. Of course. And reached out to place his other hand over All Might's chest. Well, you'd better prepare yourself, old man. You're about to get your life back. The black-haired teen closed his eyes, and, when he opened them again, they took on a golden glow before a small bout of wind began to spiral around him. From Izuku, small green wisps of pure energy began to leave his hand and flow outwards towards Akira, turning golden as they reached his other hand. What is this feeling? It had taken a minute, but All Might suddenly felt something he hadn't in years. An uncomfortable emptiness in his stomach. I'm hungry. Before he could focus on that, however, a shock of energy flowed throughout his entire body as he took a long inhale of air. Deep within him, the blonde felt the familiar energy of one for all begin to slowly pulse out more and more. Whereas before he would refer to his quirks energy feeling like a calm stream, this was a roaring river of pure power that was finally being freed from the dam of his injuries. And just as the blonde felt his power skyrocket, Izuku and Akira both fell to the floor, heaving with every breath and sweat pouring down their entire body. Ugh, I hate everything about this. Akira groaned into the sand, holding his heart. Izuku simply stared up at the morning sky with a glazed expression and zero thoughts in his mind. All the while, All Might took one final breath before his body visibly puffed outwards into the figure that every child on the planet was familiar with. Ha ha ha, I feel amazing. The man's exclamation echoed throughout the area, and the pure power emanating from him pushed the sand backwards. This power, it's almost like I'm back in my prime. His ears picked up coughing, and only then did the symbol of peace finally realize that the two teens he was with were lying down on the sand. Boys, what's wrong? Akira simply let out what sounded like a groan and a cough at the same time. Everything. He tried sitting up and just barely accomplished it. Everything is wrong. My heart hurts and my lungs are burning. Regret. Izuku only let out that one word in a whisper before sitting up without difficulty. So much regret. What happened? All Might looked over the two boys in worry. Was this too much on you? I'm truly sorry if… Akira quickly put up a hand. No. A firm statement, and he shook his head. It's just the side effect of my quirk when I deal with an injury that big and use someone else's energy to heal it. Large parts of the pain can sometimes reflect back onto me. He put a hand over his heart and take a deep breath. It's usually not this bad though. You had to have been going through hell for it to get like this. Akira Hikaru. Literal meaning. Prosperous dawn. Izuku Midoriya's best friend for the past decade, and the healer of All Might. Let me tell you this, don't even think about picking on Izuku while he's around unless you want to be hit in the face, so hard that you'd have a permanent dent on your skull. Quirk. Kai control this emitter quirk lets Akira control the very essence of life itself in both him and others, opening up a range of abilities. Self-regeneration, healing, life essence transfer, life essence enhancement, and more. Well, I thank you for what you've done to me, truly. All Might said, bowing down in front of the two teens. Both of you have given me something that I thought I may have never found again. Akira shrugged. Don't sweat it, old man. He chuckled out before waving his hand in front of his friend. Yo, Izuku, you there? His action quickly snapped the brunette out of his trance. Oh, yeah, I'm here. Izuku shook his head and laughed a bit. I knew you could do it. You're amazing. All Might nodded in agreement. Indeed, young man, such actions are worthy of praise. He knelt down and got eye level with the teen. Are you planning to enter the medical field? I would happily introduce you to a few of my friends if you were. Recovery Girl would love you. The mention of the Dr. Hero made Akira's eyes go wide, but he shook his head. I'm I'm actually planning on becoming a hero with Izuku, he stated firmly. We've been training and preparing for this since we were like 5. 5 years old? The large man asked with surprise. You kids get more determined with every passing generation. Back in my day, some of us didn't even think about becoming heroes until our final year of middle school. All Might laughed as he reminisced his old friends. Hell, some of them didn't even get a hero license until they were adults. We just wanted to be prepared, Akira said with a shrug. Martial arts training, Parker on the weekends. Swimming out to the reef, not at this beach though. All Might's eyebrow shot up and his eyes started to shift over Izuku's form. Though it was hard to tell what he was working with, the greenette shirt did leave his forearms visible, and they were very obviously not noodle arms. Young Midoriya, would you mind taking your shirt off from me? Izuku tilted his head. Excuse me? Akira also titled his head. What? I just need to see what I'm working with here. All Might reassured them, hands up in mock surrender. Can't train someone without knowing what you start with. Nodding at the logic, Izuku's hand went to the hem of his shirt. Yeah, all right then. And without so much as a second thought, he took off his shirt. In doing so, he revealed a body that looked like it was sculpted by the gods. The morning light reflected off his body and gave him an ethereal glow. If his body was a canvas, Izuku had painted the Mona Lisa and Starry Night at the same time. Large arms that were shining, showing off his lightly tanned skin and a few visible veins. A very visible 8-pack cut like diamonds, supporting a chest much bigger than one would think. And when the greenette turned around, that back was perfect. Holy shit! All Might exclaimed in English as well, stepping back a bit in shock. Ha! You hid that pretty well, young Midoriya. Izuku just shrugged. I wear baggy clothes a lot. Hides everything. All Might nodded with a laugh. That it does. Before taking out a stack of papers and ripping it in half. I guess that means you won't be needing this workout plan then. A body such as that is more than ready for my power. Akira raised his eyebrow at the blonde man's phrasing. Hold on. Ready for your power? He asked. What's that supposed to mean? The symbol of peace held out his right arm, and it pulsed with energy. This power of mine is a stockpiling quirk that has been passed down from hero to hero like a torch. He explained as 7 rainbow lights began to flow around his arm. Cultivated by 8 generations of heroes, this quirk holds the power to split the skies with a single punch. An unprepared body would explode upon trying to use it. He could what? Akira shouted in disbelief. Izuku also put his hands around his still naked chest. I could what? All Might quickly rushed to explain, waving his hands in front of him quickly. Wait, no, don't worry. Young Midoriya here will be able to handle at least 10% of one for all with a body such as his, he said in a rush. Luckily for him, it worked, and the 2 teens visibly relaxed. Wait, only 10%? Akira raised his eyebrow as he asked. Is that all his body could theoretically take? That did not seem like a lot to him. That's actually a lot of power. But it definitely seemed like a lot for Izuku. Think about it. Assuming All Might has had this power for as long as he's been a hero, the amount of power he's stockpiled within the quirk would be incredibly ridiculous. Meaning that you'd be starting with his full power as a base and working off from there. Akira finished, nodding his head in realization. Yeah, this is why you're the quirk nerd, he said with a laugh. At least that'll make using this quirk easier. Wait, Izuku said, turning to All Might. Will you still be able to use your quirk after you give it to me? He asked, apprehension lining his voice, and the real question clear. Will you still be a hero after you give me the quirk? All Might's face once more turned soft, and he put his hand on Izuku's shoulder. After I give it to you, it won't be my quirk anymore, it'll be yours. He laughed off the teen's distraught look and pet him. Worry not on this, young Midoriya. Now that you've both healed me, I'll be able to continue using one for all for at least a year. His eyes shifted around the beach as he stood back to his full height. Though, since I can live normally again, I think I'll hold off on using it and try to get myself back into shape. Smiling his signature smile, All Might puffed out his chest. Now, it's time for you to receive one for all. The greenette started to imagine how the power would be transferred. Does he pass it by placing his head on my head? Or is it something more ceremonial? Eat this, All Might exclaimed, holding out a lock of his hair. Izuku and Akira both looked at the hair with apprehension, shock, and disgust. I'm sorry, what? The 2 teens asked simultaneously, wondering if their brains had actually heard what they thought they did. Eat this and take my power. Yup, he actually said that. How on earth could that possibly work? Akira asked for both his own curiosity and Izuku. The latter being frozen in place from what the black-haired teen guessed was apprehension. All Might simply laughed. Of course, it must seem strange, he said before holding the hair up. One for all is passed down through the ingestion of DNA. This piece of my hair contains both the power of my quirk and my will to give it to you. His explanation was actually pretty sound. I thought this would be better than saliva or blood. Izuku unfroze as his brain processed the man's last statement. Wait, doesn't that mean that anyone The greenette looked down again as he realized how embarrassing what he was about to ask was. Let's say I, hypothetically, share my DNA with someone using alternate methods. Would they get one for all? He was blushing like a tomato at the end of his question and refused to look his hero in the eye. All Might understood his implications though and tried not to laugh. Don't worry, young Midoriya. The power can only be transferred if you will it so, he explained, easing Izuku's worries. Oh, all right then, Izuku exclaimed, shakily but excitedly taking the hair from All Might's hand. Bottoms up. He slowly swallowed the hair and immediately started choking, causing Akira's quirk to activate on reflex. Izuku. Holding up his hand, the greenette slowly swallowed the hair before glaring at All Might. How much shampoo do you use? He wished he shoved it down his throat instead now. All Might chuckled sheepishly. I thought it would make it taste better. Akira shot him a deadpan look. Anyway, it'll take about 3 or 4 hours before the power transfers completely. He deflated into his normal form. Let's do some cleaning. 3 hours later. All Might puffed up into his muscle form and heaved a partly broken couch above his head before dumping it down on the sand and puffing down into his skinny form. All right, that was a nice workout. He wiped off the sweat on his forehead with a laugh and turned to his new protege. I think it's been enough time now. Let's see if you can use it. All right, Izuku exclaimed, jumping up and standing out in a large area clean of rubbish before he adopted a confused expression. Wait, he looked to his new mentor and best friend. How do I use this? Akira sat up and rolled his shoulders. That part is simple. All you gotta do is feel down deep inside yourself and reach out for your new power. All Might interrupted the black-haired teen by blowing up into his muscle form. And when you feel it, clench your butt cheeks and scream out from the bottom of your heart with all you can. No. But Akira had jumped up and smacked All Might right back down into his skinny form. Did you forget what you said before? Izuku could break if he used all 100% right off the bat? Huh, strong hit. The large blonde rubbed the back of his head with surprise before looking sheepish. Right, got too into it there, my bad. The black-haired teen shook his head in disappointment before looking towards his confused best friend. All right then, welcome to Quirk 101. He clapped his hands in front of him and took off his shirt, revealing his body that was almost as ripped as Izuku's. Though while the greenette was leaner in figure and had a great overall build, Akira's specialty was his chest and arms. His chest was his most interesting feature as a bright golden glow was shining on the part where his heart would be. Most toddlers figure this out, so you should get it pretty quickly. Izuku nodded as he tried to hype himself up. All right, what do I have to do? Feel for this. Akira pointed to the glowing heart on the left side of his chest. You've gone over it 100 times with me. Energy-based quirks like ours have cores where our power lies. You have to feel for that and slowly let it out. To accentuate his point, he held out his arms and golden veins of power began to spread out from his golden heart. Quirks are extensions of their user. Think of it as something as easy as breathing, blinking, walking. I never get tired of seeing this. Akira's powered-up form always amazed Izuku, and he felt giddy at the prospect of finally being able to replicate it. Okay. The greenette settled himself in a wide stance before reaching down. One for all. Deep down in his mind, Izuku actually felt like he was walking on a path. He could only see pitch black, but there was a small spark of rainbow light at the end of an infinite abyss that he willed himself to move towards. However, before he took one step, it pulsed out. A bright spectrum of light rushed outwards from the spark in waves, and Izuku felt it spread throughout his body. On the outside, Akira watched with wonder as pink veins of power began to spread out from his friend's chest, and a small wind emanate from him, pushing back the sand. Dude, you're doing it, he exclaimed with a laugh. I know, it's great, Izuku shouted back as he took deep breaths, trying to keep his new power in control. Hey, I think I got it, Og. But the power of one for all proved difficult, and the veins on the greenette's body intensified as he glowed like the sun. Damn it, he could feel the power he had. It was a lot. Shit, Izuku, shut it down, Akira shouted as he struggled to walk up to his friend. What in the world? The mere presence of the full power of one for all created waves upon waves of force that was making a crater around Izuku. Black and green lightning shot out from him, and Akira found himself in some sort of battle of wills just to stay conscious. And it wasn't just him. All Might as well had unconsciously shifted into his powered-up form, and he felt a small spark within him fight back against the waves of energy coming off the young teen. Seeing their struggles, Izuku closed his eyes and tried to push back the rainbow light. Please, not right now. This is too much. Luckily for him, the quirk seemed to understand his request and immediately began to recede. Oh, thank the stars. The action flooded the greenette with a sense of relief, as he no longer could feel every individual muscle fiber snapping and his bones feel like they were being crushed. As soon as the pain subsided, Izuku fell to the floor and Akira ran up to him with a worried expression, his golden heart still glowing. Izuku, are you all right? He placed his right hand over his friend's back and golden veins flowed out from his heart to his hand as he felt for any injuries. Damn, that's a lot of strain. I think I'm good. Izuku grunted as he stood up and began to roll his shoulders. It was such a bright light, and then it just rushed out at me like a river. He sighed and lowered his head. I couldn't control it at all. All Might walked up and smiled softly at Izuku. Young Midoriya, you only just received this power. You can't expect to get the hand of straight away, can you? The greenette only offered him a flat look. Did you? An awkward silence was his answer. Right. But he's All Might. Akira suddenly cut in, pushing away the aforementioned hero to sling his own arm around his best friend. And you're Izuku Midoriya. Things are bound to be different. Izuku sighed but smiled. All right, I'll try again. He stood up straighter and raised his head. I definitely know how much power to let out now though. That spike gave me a baseline for scaling. There he is, the black-haired teen exclaimed before moving back, getting into a wide stance and holding his arms out in front of him. Oh, just in case you, he started as his friend looked at him confused. Confusion turned into chuckling and Izuku mimicked the stance before closing his eyes again. One for all, please work with me. This time, the quirk responded but held back on the light show, earning a smile from its new holder. Maybe let's start out with 5% to start, yeah? A less intense wave of power washed out of Izuku, and only pink veins washed his body as he glowed a tiny bit. However, the feeling from just this mere 20th of his new power sent the greenette's heart ablaze with joy. All right, no deadly aura. Akira slowly lowered his arms, but kept his quirk active as he observed Izuku's powered-up form. How are you feeling there, bud? His response was the greenette jumping up high in the air and screaming with joy. Yes, Izuku exclaimed as backflipped in the air twice before landing, laughing as he felt no injuries despite the height he reached. I feel great. He jumped up a few times, giddy with laughter as he felt like he was on a powerful trampoline, before running off across the beach. I can't believe this is only 5%. I feel amazing. A small tear shed from Akira's eye as he watched his best friend run around, but he wiped it away just as the aforementioned greenette grinded to a halt and planted his face right in the sand. You good? Surprising himself, Izuku sat up with a smile. Yup. He stood back up and rolled his shoulders as he tried to get used to this new feeling. Overall physiology enhancement targeting the muscles and the bone, but also an energy-based quirk and immediately started mumbling. As he did so, Akira was touching the black and green sparks that was emanating from Izuku's entire body. Yo, Izuku. He quickly tapped the greenette's heads and pointed to the sparks. What's up with this stuff? Izuku tilted his head in confusion before his eyes caught the sparks of power coming off his arm. Oh, that's weird. He reached out towards them and tried to rein them in. Weirder. And, to his surprise, they listened, causing the sparks to slowly disappear. Now it was Akira's turn to tilt his head. What did you just do? He put his own arm just above his friend's and could feel a very small field of something when his palm got close. What does it feel like? I just thought of grabbing them and pulling them back into my body, Izuku explained, flexing his arms as he felt a strange buzzing over them. It actually feels a bit weird, but a good weird. He automatically looked to their resident hero for help. What's the sparky thing about? All Might had stayed silent so far, and only after looking did the boys see that he had apparently been crying. though he quickly wiped away his tears and buffed up to his muscle form. The sparks of one for all. From what I can tell, it is the pure power of the quirk when it is unfocused. Proving his point, he let his automatic control on his quirk go and golden sparks began to spike off his arm. Don't forget, at its very core, one for all is an energy quirk. Izuku nodded at the explanation before holding up his arms and seeing the pink veins spreading out along them. What about these pink veins? What's their deal? At this, the large blonde deflated on the spot and shrugged. One for all works different for each user. This is just the quirk's visual manifestation on you, he explained before standing in a pose. Now, you seem to have a good grip on the power already, a wondrous achievement. Despite being in his skinny form, the man's laugh was still loud and echoed throughout the empty beach. But now we begin a 10-month training journey to get you both ready for Yui's entrance exam. His two new students threw their hands up in the air. Yeah. All Might chuckled. Judging by what you two mentioned in your training regime earlier, am I correct in assuming you can both fight already? At their nods, he smiled and held out his arms. Then our focus for our training will be to clean this beach, before pointing right at Izuku, and getting you used to your power. He stressed the last part and smiled at the nod he received. All right, let's get started. Yes, All Might, Izuku and Akira said, saluting. The action elicited a laugh from the large blonde. While I'm in this form, call me Sensei, Yagi, or both. We don't want people to know our secret, remember? Yes, Yagi-sensei, Izuku and Akira repeated, saluting again. All Might couldn't help but smile. This was going to be a fun 10 months. 8 months later. We really did this, Akira said with a smile on his face, sitting on a bench on the beach's newly repaired gazebo. I mean, it was mainly you, Yagi-sensei, but I still feel really accomplished. Izuku nodded in agreement, laying in the sun shirtless with a pair of forest green sunglasses on, working his light tan to a more visible one. And to think that people had turned this place into a dump. His eyes shifted over to All Might and he smiled. But this mostly goes to you, Yagi-sensei. You really pushed yourself harder than you did us in your training. It was true, and that action had bore the blonde man results. All Might was no longer the skinny, frail shadow of himself in his regular form. His newly repaired stomach was used excessively to catch up with the 5 years of real food the blonde missed, and he quickly filled out all of his shirts. From there, his ruthless self-training including meditation, shadow boxing, and actual boxing sharks from beyond Takoba Beach's shores gave him a figure similar to the one he held in his time in America. This also meant that there was very little to almost no difference when he activated the last flame of one for all inside of him. The most noticeable difference was that he just got very slightly more buff, and his voice always had a more energetic edge to it when using it. The only real backlash all of this recovery training seemed to have is that the blonde hadn't been on patrol for at least 4 months. Most of Japan was worried, and All Might knew he'd have to make a return soon or his usual cities would begin to fall into chaos. I'm not the only one who improved, All Might said, laying down in the sand next to Izuku and discarding his previous thoughts. You two both have improved a great deal since we started. This statement was also true. Izuku and Akira had developed their bodies, minds, and quirks. It still felt weird to Izuku when he talked about it as best they could. While they hadn't buffed up like All Might had, they had both grown to a comfortable 5'9" with no sign of stopping and conditioned their bodies to feel like stone on the surface. For Izuku, he had spent the 8 months cultivating his body as much as he could to use more of one for all and bore great results. Through his rigorous training, he had quickly attuned his body to reach 35% of one for all in a technique he called full cowling. With this new strength, Izuku could do 2 things. First, it meant that he could use many martial arts moves that weren't considered effective, because they'd lack strength or seemed impossible due to the human body's limitations. Second, he could create both a close combat style and a ranged combat style. In his close combat style, the Greenet's in-depth analysis of kung fu and martial arts as a whole led him down a rabbit hole of different variants of several martial arts, until he found one that he loved. Pak-mei Kung Fu, one of the oldest and only surviving forms of the Hakka styles of kung fu. It focused on the interception and deflection of the opponent's movements, grabbing and controlling the opponent, as well as simultaneously parrying and attacking them. This form was focused on explosive power. It was perfect for him. For his ranged combat style, Izuku took after a martial art that he secretly taught himself for the past 5 years. A mix of karate and capoeira that focused on kicking. By combining that mixed style with one for all's ability to displace air, Izuku made Air Force. It was a dance of arcing kicks and a flurry of lightning punches that would send air flashes and air bullets at his opponent from a distance when he needed to. Now for Akira, he spent the 8 months helping Izuku build up his body to host One for All, which ended up building his own body up as well. Not planned, but he didn't complain. Further, after the constant spars he had with his friend, the black-haired teen's quirk was continuously growing with power to try and match the other. While Akira didn't have the ability to displace air the same way Izuku did, he could still pack a punch and found another fighting style that he mixed with his kung fu to make a style with more flow. Whereas Izuku did direct parries and deflection, Akira focused on moving with the flow of his opponent's attack and bringing it back towards them. He called it the Fist of the Lotus Flower. Overall, their training had turned them into true powerhouses, and they hadn't even finished the full 10 months yet. It also made Izuku more confident in himself, standing up to every bully in his school for both himself and anyone else that was getting picked on before. Though, Akira knew his friend could have done that before if he tried. The Greenette's quirkless strength was a sight to behold. "What's next on our training montage?" Akira asked, standing up from the bench and walking over to his mentor. "I mean, people are bound to start using this beach sooner or later. We can't keep training here." Izuku nodded, still staring up at the clear blue skies. "Yeah, this beach is about to be filled with everyone from our school and community." Yes, I have already arranged for us a new training location," All Might said, sitting up on his towel. "You are right that this is no longer a place to train. It is a place to relax. I'll be taking you two to Yuyui." His 2 new students immediately were right next to him, eyes bugging out of their heads. "You're taking us to Yuyui?" They both shouted at the same time. All Might nodded. "Indeed. I have spoken to the principal of our situation, and he has agreed to provide us with Yuyui's training grounds," he explained. "Both he and another member of staff are in on our secret." "Wait," Izuku raised an eyebrow. "There are other people that know about One for All?" he asked, surprise lacing his voice. "Yes, there are. A handful of my longest and closest friends and colleagues," the large blonde responded, a smile on his face. "They have my utmost trust, don't fret." Akira shook his head. "Okay, we're going to need a list of everyone that knows so we know whether to freak out or not if it suddenly comes up in conversation," he said, Izuku nodding furiously next to him. All Might nodded. "I suppose that's fair," and pulled out his phone before typing in a few names and gave them the phone. Like I said, only a handful. The man was right, as Izuku and Akira could only spot 5 names on the list. Not a lot. "Principal Nezu, recovery girl, Sir Nightai." Izuku paused. "Hold on, who is Naomasa Tsukachi?" "That," All Might started with a smile, "is one of my best and longest friends. He's a former Special Forces operative, now detective, that has worked with me since my days in America." Akira raised an eyebrow at the last name on the list. "Who is Gran Torino?" An awkward silence answered him, and both teens turned to look at a shivering All Might. "Well, he coughed a lot louder than he should have and tried to straighten his hunched-over back. "Back when I was your age, Gran Torino was a big pro. He taught me all I knew about fighting." His mind flashed with memories of his lessons, and he shook his head before deciding to call it a day. "All right, meet me at Yuyui tomorrow, goodbye," and left quickly. "Well, that was weird," Izuku said before deciding to ignore what just happened, an action that Akira followed suit in. "Well, it's barely even noon yet," he said as he looked at his watch. "We got the entire day to burn. What are we going to do?" The green-haired teen hummed. "Are you hungry?" Akira shook his head. "Nah, we had an American-styled buffet for breakfast, remember?" Izuku nodded before suddenly sitting up straight. "Oh, the arcade." Akira also shot up with a wide smile on his face. "That's right. They just installed the new virtual reality room and installed all the new fighter games. It opens in 10 minutes. Izuku had pulled out his phone and rushed to grab all his belongings. "If we use our quirks, we'll be able to get in there before anyone else." And without a second thought, the two were off. UA, ground gamma observation platform, the next day. Izuku and Akira both had to stop themselves from bouncing in joy at their current predicament. They were at Yuyui High School. Before they had arrived, the 2 members of staff that were in on their secret greeted them at the gate. Principal Nezu and recovery girl. They both didn't even reach 3 feet in height, but had a certain aura around them that made them look extremely threatening. At first, the principal had welcomed them with a confused expression. When All Might had told him he had found his successor, The bipedal chimera was expecting a large, buff, slick-haired blonde with more muscles than one could need. So, it was a surprise when instead he was met with a plain-looking boy with an abundance of forest green curls. That immediately changed, however, as the greenette started talking. A tangent of how great he thought the school was and many facts about its founding and infrastructure spoken at the speed of light. It was then that Nezu learned his old friend had chosen a nerd as his successor, and he couldn't have been happier. Recovery Girl was also happy, but for a completely different reason. All Might's introduction of his new successor, who she hoped wouldn't be a regular in her office, was also accompanied by the introduction of said successor's best friend who had a healing quirk. She immediately wanted to offer the black-haired teen an apprenticeship right there, but held off and instead smiled gleefully. It had been so long since someone with a good healing quirk had chosen the path of heroics, and she had a feeling the next batch of students would need one. Those with healing quirks were always stern and did what they could to keep people safe. It was just in their nature. With Akira's arrival, she was hoping to expect less students to visit her section of the school. Right now, they were standing in one of the training grounds of the very school they were training to attend. This particular training ground was apparently known as the Industrial Grounds or Ground Gamma, a large area designed after old factories and littered with twisting pipelines and heavy machines. "All right, boys, welcome to Ground Gamma," All Might exclaimed, holding his arms out in a dramatic flare. "Today we're going to keep it simple, and you'll just run throughout the area and test your balance and ability to traverse difficult terrain." Izuku looked around the training ground with glee, but couldn't help the feeling of guilt that was setting in his chest. Yagi-sensei, isn't this whole thing a little unfair?" The thought of being trained at Yuyui to attend Yuyui just didn't sit right with the greenette, no matter how he looked at it. "Yeah, I agree with Izuku." A thought that Akira evidently shared. Most kids our age just work out, maybe do a few extracurriculars, and train their quirks normally. This feels like preferential treatment. They didn't get a response from their teacher for a moment, and they looked back at him to see a large smile on his face. "Always thinking about others. I'm so glad I was blessed to teach you too." The large blonde reached down and ruffled his student's hair, earning him an embarrassed look from both of them. "If you both truly find this unfair, you don't have to train here. We'll just do one run today, and I'll leave you two to decide what you want to do." That course of action would actually be very beneficial for all present. Principal Nezu's voice suddenly called out on the a system. "You haven't been doing your paperwork, Toshinori. You have a mountain of it in your office." Akira tilted his head. "Paperwork? Office? What does he mean by that?" Izuku asked. Nezu hummed over the speaker. "All Might will be a teacher here starting this coming school year," he explained chipperly. "I trust you two are smart enough as to conclude why." The chimera was right as the two teens reached a conclusion instantly. "You became a teacher here to scout the new potential heroes and find a successor in one of them." Izuku started. Akira finished for him. "And you chose Yuyui since it's your alma mater, and you're nostalgic like that." He laughed at the end of his statement. A laugh echoed by Nezu. "I must confess, it is quite lovely to see Toshinori finding two hero hopefuls that have brains," he said in applause to the two teens. "I love all my children here at this school, but the ones that think instead of punching through their problems are secretly my favorite." All Might looked like he might have deflated back into his skinny form at the end of that statement. "I feel attacked." And Nezu was evidently happy about that. "You should." "Okay, enough." The large blonde turned away from the and back to his students, a visibly strained smile on his face. "Like I said before, this can just be a simple day." He pointed out to the factory and his smile lost its strain. "Go run around and try not to fall over." Izuku and Akira both looked at All Might like he was stupid. "Seriously, that's it?" Akira asked with a raised eyebrow. "No robots chasing or shooting us?" It may seem simple, but this is much harder than it may appear," All Might warned. "Not unless you two happen to do Parker as well." Silence answered him, and he looked back to see the teens giving him flat looks. "What? We literally told you on our first day that we did Parker," Izuku said. "It's how we get around the prefecture to see all the heroes and villain fights." The large blonde simply sighed and dropped his smile before pointing out to the training ground. "In that case, young Midoriya, you have to try and evade young Hikaru from knocking you off the pipes." He puffed up to his muscle form and grabbed the two before reeling back his arms. "Go!" and sending Izuku off with a mighty heave, followed by Akira a moment later. "Ah!" Izuku quickly activated his quirk, spreading pink veins around his body and activating 10% of one for all. Oof. He just barely managed to catch himself on one of the cranes and took a breath. Comment at ya, Izuku, however. The greenette barely even breathed out when Akira came barreling towards him, golden veins spreading out across his entire body. If I tag you, I get your shadow operative gunhead figure. The effect of his statement was instant, and Izuku flashed out of sight, just as the black-haired reached where his friend had been. His ears picked up the distortion of air that the greenette left behind, and Akira quickly gave chase. With Izuku, he saw his friend catch his trail immediately and smiled as the real fun began. They both ducked in and out of the pipes and bounced around like balls in a pinball machine. To the outside eye, they appeared only as green and golden blurs rushing around in a zigzag. To each other, they were mocking faces and wide grins. As they bounced around, Izuku couldn't help the smile that formed on his face as he felt at one with the wind. He didn't really know why, and he didn't really much mind, but the feeling of the wind on his face as he jumped high above the ground just felt right. I wish I could fly. And that was when he passed out. Izuku opened his eyes open with a startle and shock. What the hell? Where am I? He took in his surroundings and saw that darkness encompassed him everywhere he looked. Wait a minute. His arms came up to his face and saw they were covered by a misty, dark forest green energy. I'm back. This place was not a stranger to the greenette. He had been here many times before. It started around 2 months ago. Dreams that seemed like memories that weren't his before suddenly appearing here. The only thing missing was the usual dark, 8 figures that lined up in front of him and pointed at him. After that, the dream usually ended. He hadn't told anyone about it. Of course he wouldn't. He'd sound crazier than, "You're the ninth, HM." That was new. Looking behind and around himself, Izuku searched for the source of the mysterious voice, but found he couldn't. It was still just a continuous, empty void that was probably just his mind. Izuku sighed. I must be going crazy. No, don't worry, you're perfectly sane. The voice called out again, and the greenette was able to feel rather than hear the voice coming from above him. Well, maybe not perfectly sane, but you're not hearing voices that aren't there. A large figure dropped down in front of Izuku at the speed of a bullet and stood up, revealing a woman. Whoa, and what a woman. She had a slender but voluptuous frame and dark straight hair, with bangs complemented by a beautiful pair of shimmering, purple eyes. Quickly realizing he was staring too much where he shouldn't, Izuku shifted his eyes over to what she was wearing to distract himself. Though what the woman was wearing made him pause. The strange woman wore a dark, sleeveless bodysuit with a high collar, yellow elbow-length gloves, and white knee-high boots. She also had a red cape around her waist and a white cape around her neck. She was wearing a hero costume. I'm guessing you're liking what you're seeing? The large woman asked with a teasing tone, causing Izuku to blush and stammer. Don't sweat it too much, kiddo. Lil Toshinori had that exact same look on his face the first time he met me. Izuku's face immediately scrunched up, and he tilted his head in surprise before going to speak. YKN, and immediately pausing after remembering the strange energy covering his body was also covering his mouth. You don't really have to speak. I can hear your thoughts. The lady's hand came up to him, and she tapped on his forehead. Just think, and it'll be the same as talking. Really? Izuku decided to ask mentally, surprised when he received a nod from the woman. Oh, well, he stopped for a moment before he remembered what he wanted to ask. You know Yagi-sensei? The greenette's question obviously shook the woman as a sad look cast over her face. Yeah, I did. Guess he doesn't talk about me a lot if you don't know me. Seeing another question in the teen's eyes, the woman stood up straight and offered him a big smile. Well, there's no way to say this normally. My name is Nana Shimura. I am the 7th holder of One for All. Her voice boomed throughout the void, and Izuku's eyes nearly bugged out of his head. The 7th? He knew that All Might had to have gotten One for All from someone. But he thought that was Grand Torino. You were Yagi-sensei's master. Were you a hero? Are you dead? Wait, if we're talking, does that mean I'm dead? How did I die? Whoa, Greenie, pump the brakes. I can still hear everything you're thinking. Nana laughed as she placed her hand on Izuku's head, easily covering it with her palm. Wow, Toshinori really knows how to pick 'em. A blush covered the greenette's face, though it was hard to tell with his face covered, and he looked down. Sorry, I was just confused, and I end up asking questions to give myself clarity, and that ends up in me going on a tangent that... Nana decided at that moment to pat Izuku's head, and continued to smile at him. That's all right, confusion and panic are close friends. She took her hand away from the greenette, and crouched down to eye level with him. Don't apologize for being you. Izuku smiled back at her and meekly nodded. So, I'm not dead? Nana shook her head, and he let out a sigh of relief. Wait. Before confusion took over again. Where are we then? The large black-haired woman stood back up and held out her arms. This is one for all. She laughed at Izuku's stumped face and nodded. Yup, you heard me. This is the plane of one for all. Nana started. And don't worry, this is normal. All the users except for the first have gone through something like this, kind of. Kind of? Izuku asked with a worried expression. Did I mess up one for all? Nana shook her head. No, you're just the first user to enter this plane under your particular set of circumstances. The greenette tilted his head. What circumstances? The large woman gave pause for a second before shaking her head. There's no easy way to say this, so I'll just say it. You're using my quirk right now. What? WHAT. Izuku actually managed to create a sound for a moment with his shout before his mouth was covered again. Using your quirk? What do you mean? Nana bopped her head side to side as she tried to come up with a good explanation. You know that at its core, one for all is a stockpiling quirk, right? Izuku nodded at her question, and she smiled. This quirk has been around for a while, older than almost every human on the planet. A stockpiling quirk for that long is bound to go through change. The greenette looked at her incredulously. How in the world does an energy-based stockpiling quirk turn into me using? He started before realization struck him. Did one for all stockpile your quirk? The large black-haired woman looked at him with surprise. Huh, looks like Toshi picked out a smart one. She laughed as she nodded. Yeah, that's exactly what happened to me and all the others that held this quirk. A part of our own quirk factors were stored inside one for all's core. Nana explained. And now, after over a century, the core has grown to the point that it's letting you use the quirks that it's got stocked up. Izuku's eyes did bug out of his head this time, and he knew that if it wasn't for the fact he was probably already unconscious, he would have passed out at the revelation. I'm going to be getting more quirks. The large woman nodded, and he almost started hyperventilating before another round of questions came into his head. Wait, what quirk am I using right now? And why? Nana smiled. This was a question she could answer. That one is simple. You were just wishing about flying or something like that before you came in here, right? At the greenette's nod, she started to lift off of the ground. Well, that's my quirk, float. Nana Shimura. Literal meaning. The seventh aspiring village. Nana Shimura. An old friend of Gran Torino's, and the old master to All Might himself. As the seventh holder of One for All, she was extremely powerful, and was known as the Skyward Hero. Nana. Quirk. Float. Nana's original quirk before receiving One for All allowed her to suspend herself off the ground to achieve a form of flight. That's so cool. Izuku's eyes filled with stars as he watched the large woman do multiple flips in the air before coming back down just above ground level. Was this even ground? I've always wanted to fly. Nana laughed at the greenette's enthusiasm before she suddenly dropped to the floor. Ah, looks like I'm running out of time. She quickly stood up and pointed at Izuku. All right, kiddo, listen and listen well. The best way to use float is to simply think about being free. Untether yourself from gravity and just simply be with the sky. The passion with which she spoke lit a fire in Izuku's heart, and he nodded furiously. I will. He was getting giddy at the thought of being able to soar high above the clouds and view the world from above. I promise. Nana's legs began to be covered by a similar energy to what covered Izuku, though hers was purple. One last message. She struggled to walk up to the greenette and knelt down in front of him, hand on his shoulder. Always remember that those who smile in this world are the strongest. Smile even when it gets scary or bad. The large woman placed her forehead on Izuku's. And know you are never alone. One for All and its past holders are with you. Do your best. With that final message, the black and purple energy fully consumed Nana, and she disappeared. It didn't take long until Izuku followed suit. Ground Gamma Observation Platform. Once more, Izuku found himself opening his eyes with a startle as he woke up again. Though this time he was not greeted by silence. Instead he heard the idle chatter of Akira, All Might, Principal Nezu, and Recovery Girl. Wait, he just moved. Out of the way. Muscles. Recovery Girl was the first to notice his wake, and immediately shoved All Might aside with a whack of her cane. Sweetie, are you okay? Akira was next to rush to his side, and immediately placed a glowing hand on his friend's shoulder. Dude, what happened out there? Your energy spiked out again, and you just stopped mid-jump, he exclaimed. You were floating. At the end of the black-haired teen's statement, The memories of what happened just before flashed into Izuku's mind, and he quickly shook his head. I think you're all going to want to sit down for this. One convoluted explanation later. By the end of the explanation, to say the other four present were absolutely dumbfounded would have been an understatement. Akira and Recovery Girl both looked at the greenette like he was crazy, while All Might looked like he might cry. Off to the side, Nezu was grinning, glad that there were still things in this world that could surprise him. Just as well, this whole ordeal was becoming boring. So, All Might crouched down to Izuku, and everyone could see he was slowly breaking. You met Nana. The greenette nodded and smiled widely. Yeah, she was beautiful. This time, All Might did break, and a few tears left his eyes. Yes, indeed she was. Wiping them away, he quickly stood back up and his smile came back. So, you can use float now? Izuku stood up and felt out one for all. She said I'd be able to use her quirks and the other quirks of the other holders. He explained while trying to float. Not sure who they are though. Oh, I shall handle that for you. Nezu said, leaving his thoughts. I have level 1 access to the hero network, and am more than capable of hacking into what I don't possess access to. I'll find who they were for you. Izuku gave the chimera an appreciative look and bowed down straight. Thank you, Principal Nezu. No, thank you. Nezu responded in a chipper tone. I've had nothing fun to do in a while, and your introduction is certain to bring me much joy and chaos. His eyes became glazed for a moment before he walked away. Come now, Gio. We still have to deal with the explosion power loader caused. With that, Nezu and Recovery Girl walked off, the latter leaving the two teens a handful of gummies and a final message. I hope that you two won't be regulars in my office if you manage to get in. The three waved them off and Akira decided to get back to an issue he had with their situation. One question. He started. It would have been easy to tell people that you randomly got a stockpiling quirk that you didn't know about. How are you going to explain float and all the other quirks though? Izuku simply waved him off. Oh, don't worry, I got the perfect excuse for that. At the quizzical looks he received, he stopped trying to fly and stood straight. Just tell the truth. I have an energy manipulation quirk with a stockpiling component, and can manipulate the energy to fit my situation. Akira and All Might both looked at the greenette with surprise. That is actually a well thought out excuse. It's almost perfect, the latter said. Captain Celebrity's quirk works in a similar manner, so it's not a stretch. Great. Akira nodded at the large blonde before turning to Izuku. So, you gonna try and fly now? Yup, Izuku exclaimed, already running to the edge of the platform. Be free. Closing his eyes and trying to remember what Nana said, the greenette focused on connecting himself to the air before spiking one for all and jumping off. Akira and All Might both watched as he did this with hopeful expressions that quickly turned to awe as Izuku shot straight upwards with no sign of stopping. Izuku, you're totally doing it. The black-haired teen exclaimed before turning to the large blonde. Yagi-sensei, he's doing it. All Might nodded with a large smile and a single tear. Indeed, he's really doing it. Up in the sky, Izuku was soaring and shooting through the air with an excited smile on his face. I'm totally doing it. His exclamation was followed by him doing a flip in the air and swerving around the pipes before diving back down towards the platform. Oof, where he made an extremely rough landing. Okay. He started, pulling his face out of the ground. I might need to work on the landings. Akira ran up to his friend and laughed. Yeah, I don't think arriving on scene by kissing the ground is going to make a good impression on civilians. Before patting the greenette on the back hard. Good job though, dude. That was so cool. Izuku smiled back at his friend and dusted himself off. I'm going to enjoy training this quirk, he said, giddy at being able to now fly. Though, might have to do it above the clouds so I don't get caught. Oh, there's no need for that. All Might said, walking up to the two. You can just apply for a flying license. They'll allow you to fly around whenever you wish. The greenette tilted his head. Am I old enough to apply for one of those? He asked. I mean, I know what they are. My ma has one. But can I get one? All Might nodded. Yes, anyone with a quirk that allows them to fly in any capacity can apply for a license from the moment they turn 10. He explained. Just ask your mother for help. It's a simple process. The large blonde looked at his watch. If you go now, then you can get one. The licensing agencies don't close for another hour. Wait, what time is it? Izuku asked, pulling out his own phone. The time he saw sent his eyes bugging out of his head. I was knocked out for 2 hours. Akira nodded and nudged his friend in the gut with his foot. Yeah, you're usually not a heavy sleeper, but damn, you were out cold. The greenette smiled at his friend's jab before standing up. Right, I'll guess we'll be off then, he said as he bowed to All Might. Thank you for all your help, Yagi-sensei. An action that Akira copied. We'll see you in 2 months. And with that, they both walked off, Izuku suspending himself off the ground every now and then. They're going to be great, All Might thought as he watched them, though he couldn't think for long as the a system crackled back to life. Toshinori, while I understand staring at nothing can be fun, your time would best be spent finishing your paperwork. All Might let out a sigh. This is going to be a rough 2 months. Entrance, day of the entrance exam. Izuku and Akira both stood proudly in front of the entrance gates to Yui. It had been 2 months since the greenette received float, and both teens had spent every day since then turning every single thing they did into training to keep themselves active. Walk to school. No, they parked across buildings to get there. Simple weight training. They went to the dumps, and in Akira's case, some construction company out in the country, and volunteered themselves to lift anything heavy that the workers would let them. Friendly spars in their backyard. It is a miracle that the forest next to their homes hasn't been destroyed. Izuku had managed to improve his control of one for all over the past 2 months, and had now increased his maximum output to 40%. His mastery of his pack-mei style had improved, and float was now fully integrated into Air Force since his flying improved. His new flying license definitely helped with that. He went out for a fly at every opportunity he could. Akira had also improved greatly in the past 2 months. He had basically mastered his Fist of the Lotus Flower and discovered that his quirks energy, while concentrated in a certain way, could disrupt and even shut down parts of someone's body if he forced it into them. The black-haired teen decided to capitalize on this and had Izuku teach him pack-mei before creating a variant form of the art that isolated pressure point strikes. He appropriately named this new technique Kai blocking. Overall, the two had prepared for this as much as they could, and now stood before the gates that would open the path to their future. All they had left to do was walk in. Oi, move it, nerds. Of course, can't start off their day without their daily dose of Bakugo. You're blocking my way. Akira didn't even need to turn around to know who was behind him. Wow, so nice to see you as well, Bakugo, he said, sarcasm dripping in his tone. If you want to get in, just walk around us. Izuku nodded, also not turning around to spare the explosive blonde teen a glance. Come on, Bakugo, it's like 5 feet, you'll live, said blonde Pomeranian. Looked like he wanted to bark out every swear word in the dictionary and add some while he was at it, but instead opted for taking very deep breaths. Just get through the exam, Katsuki, he mumbled to himself as he walked around them. Get through the exam, get first place, become a hero, never see them again. Both Izuku and Akira heard his mumbling, and were actually hoping that his statement would ring true. Fate had stuck the 3 of them together in every class they had for the past 10 years. They didn't want to make it 11. All right, we should probably go in now, Akira said, resecuring his bag over his shoulder. We'll be able to stare all we want after we get in and start attending. Izuku jabbed his friend playfully in his side. Don't let Bakugo rub off on you. I'm not sure what I would do if my best friend suddenly turned into a Pomeranian. The black-haired teen laughed at that, and the two made their way inside, ready to pass the first part of their exam, the written portion. Auditorium, 3 hours later. Izuku and Akira were some of the first people to finish their written tests, and had made their way over to the auditorium they were currently in and took their seats at the back. The two were fairly confident that they had passed the written test with high marks. Study was an important part of their routine alongside all their physical training. Also, they were, as Bakugo had so accurately put it, nerds. It didn't take too long before more people began to walk in, and the two teens decided to observe their competition. Hundreds of students from almost every school in Japan, and even schools from outside their country, walked in, each with varying expressions from confident, arrogant, shy, nervous, and laid back. By the time the last 3 students ran in proclaiming something about the blonde in their group, making them late, while the pink-haired girl hit on the black-haired one, the lights shut off before a single spotlight was directed to the stage. Welcome, everyone, a loud voice called out, echoing throughout the large hall. I hope you're all doing well today. The figure in question, who the voice belonged to, was a man with long blonde hair, held upwards like a cockatoo in rock clothes. The voice hero, present Mike. Can I get a yeah? Everyone murmured loudly among themselves at the introduction of the voice hero. but only Izuku and Akira took the man up on his request. Yeah. The action received them a round of chuckled from a few examinees, and a large smile from the hero on stage. I'm loving the enthusiasm. You too, thank you for that. He turned to everyone else with an equally large smile. Alright, I'll be explaining the rules to all y'all kiddos today. Are you ready for it? Once more, Izuku and Akira stood up to shout. This time, however, many other examinees stood up with them. Yeah, woo, hell yes. They all loudly shouted and whistled hard, getting an even larger smile from their resident hero. Finally, this routine didn't work for the past 2 years. I was losing hope. Present Mike quickly schooled his thoughts and turned on the projector. Great, glad to see everyone's hyped. Now, this practical exam is going to be pretty simple. The screen came to life and showed an aerial of 8 small city blocks. These mock cities here are where we hold the practical exam. Today you'll all be split evenly between them and put in a mock battle with robots running rampart throughout each area. On the screen, a pixel animation of All Might running up and punching a robot came up before 3 more similar animations were shown. Video game much. The style and presentation didn't fail to make a few of the examinees laugh. Laughs that caused Present Mike to smile. Yes, I knew it. These animations totally work. He made a mental note to brag to one of his co-workers that his stupid idea worked before focusing again. The robots you face will have a point value assigned to them that you'll see on their chests. 1, 2 or 3 points. The screen changed again to show the silhouettes of 4 robots. Your task is simple. Destroy as many as you can within the time limit we give you. Please keep it heroic as well. No sabotaging others, or it'll be an instant disqualification. The grumble of a few examinees at the end of the blonde hero's statement, including Bakugo's, did not inspire the hero at all. However, before the blonde could make a mental note on that or finish off his explanation, a new loud voice echoed in the hall. Excuse me, Present Mike, sir. The interruption surprised everyone, and they turned to the source of the noise to find a tall, well-built, blue-haired teen with glasses standing straight up. I have a question. The blonde hero seemed to recognize the interrupter and smiled before he spoke. Sure, what's your question? Examinee no. 17111. This pamphlet here and the screen behind you shows us that there are 4 robots in this exam. The blue-haired teen exclaimed, chopping the air as he spoke. And yet you have only given us an explanation for 3 of them. Is this a misprint? Exemplary students, such as the gathered body here today, came here because this is a prestigious school. A mistake such as this simply will not do. By the end of his triad, a number of students began to chuckle, with a few outright laughing at the boy. Izuku and Akira were definitely included in that number. Dude, I can't, Akira silently exclaimed, hunching over himself in suppressed laughter. He's way too serious about this. Izuku wasn't faring any better. I'm gonna pass out. His laughing slowly turned into heavy coughing, which evidently turned into even more laughter. Someone make him stop. I'm gonna pee. The sound of their laughter and words, however, were not missed by the blue-haired teen as he had turned around to the pair and stared them down. You too, he pointed at them, and the two stopped their laughter when the students around them told them the teen was calling them out. Is this exam a joke to you? You've both been nothing but interruptions and yelling like children. If all you're here to do is mess around, then I would suggest. Okay, whoa, pause. Akira said, losing his laughter and raising his hand. I'm gonna stop you right there, pal. His tone of voice was not playful at all. I don't know who you think you are, but you are being an extreme hypocrite right now. The blue-haired teen looked affronted, and even a little mad. I beg your pardon. Beg all you want, glasses, doesn't stop you from being a hypocrite. Izuku cut in, also losing his laughter and his smile. We were in no way disruptions. Presentation Michael over there. Everyone, including the hero, the Greenette reference, laughed at the name. Even enjoyed our exclamations since he hadn't actually begun explaining anything yet. The glasses teen went to interject, but Akira cut him off again. You, on the other hand, interrupted dear Present Mike, while he was still going with the presentation where he probably would have explained the part you claim is missing. So, really, if anyone is an interruption here. Izuku decided to finish it before they both went on unnecessary tangents. It's you, not us. Unsuppressed laughter echoed throughout the hall at the end of Izuku and Akira's statements, and the blue-haired teen from before sat down immediately without retort, a light pink dusting his cheeks. Present Mike kept a straight face throughout the laughter, but was internally hollering. I can't believe Tensei was right. I have to tell him about this. He thought to himself before deciding to finish his presentation off. They were on a time limit. All right, settle down everyone. Now, as I was about to say, the blue-haired teen's blush went red, and he ducked down. The fourth and final robot is worth 0 points. 0, nada, nothing. His proclamation garnered no small amount of confused looks and tilted heads from the gathered student body. 0 points? You can just think of those robots as an obstacle of sorts. Avoid it if you come across it, since there's really no point in fighting it. The blonde hero continued, internally smirking at the clueless looks on the students' faces. Well, that's basically all from me, he said as he looked at his watch. I'll sign off with a little present though, our school motto. Smiles broke out throughout the hall as he said this. The hero Napoleon Bonaparte once said, "A true hero is someone who overcomes life's misfortunes." So, my dear little listeners, go beyond. Everyone stood up with present mic at the end and threw their fists up to the sky. Plus Ultra. Battle Center Beta. Unfortunately for Izuku and Akira, they had both been separated from each other for their practical exams. The former being taken here at Battle Center Beta, while the latter was taken to Battle Center Omega. The two guessed that the principal didn't want people from the same school teaming up with each other, since Bakugo also wasn't in either of their arenas. Not that this mattered. They were going to smoke this show. Izuku was just wearing a pair of dark forest green track pants and a similarly colored hoodie for his attire, accompanied by a pair of red earmuffs and a yellow visor. The other accessories were for flying. Earmuffs for when he went fast and the visor for his eyes. Overall, he didn't really look like much of a threat, causing the other examinees to write him off as the plain, funny guy from the auditorium. That was fine though. Way better than what his middle school thought. The gates suddenly opened and Izuku's thoughts cleared before he looked around at the other examinees. No one else seemed to notice, and if they did then they just ignored it. They all just kept stretching and warming up. Never one to follow the crowd, the greenette decided to risk it for the biscuit and immediately rushed in. 15% of one for all began to wash through Izuku's body as he passed the gates, and his skin glowed alongside the pink veins that covered his form. It didn't take long before he was in the city, and he stopped to observe his surroundings. The greenette was just standing in the middle of a large city square with a distinct lack of robots. However, this wasn't a problem for much longer, as the sound of metal crashing against the pavement rung in his ears, and he saw he was surrounded. Target identified. An incredibly large, buff robot Knuckle walked up to the pit, easily the largest of the gathered robots, reaching 3 times the greenette's height. It had a blocky gorilla figure, walking on all fours with its large, thick arms and shorter, thick legs, all painted a military green. Initiating kick-ass protocol. The most notable feature, however, was the spray-painted number 3 on its chest and fire designs on it. Looks like the support course had fun making these ones, Izuku thought before looking towards the other gathered robots. Lots of fun. 4 smaller, more monkey-like robots just below the greenette's height stood behind the gorilla bot in an arc, aiming their arms at him with what Izuku assumed was wrist-mounted guns. They held themselves in a jumping position with one arm outstretched and the other reeled back, while a metal tail flicked behind them. Their paint job was similar to the 3-pointer, but instead held a 1 on their chests, and they each had different animal designs on its arms. Kick his ass, 3. The 1-pointer with a bear head spray painted on it shouted in a robotic voice. Another 1-pointer with golden fur spray painted on its arms nodded. Yeah, get 'em. Seriously, they programmed them with lines? Izuku smiled at the banter the robots were giving him and turned to the final robot. The 2-pointers. A single 2-pointer stood behind him opposite from the 1-pointers, and was a pretty good in between of the 1 and 3-pointers. It had a buff frame twice the size of Izuku in both height and width, holding both the most humanoid figure of the 3 robots and a staff in their hands. Their colors were also a much darker military green compared to the other 2. Let us begin. The 2-pointer said in a much more robotic voice than expected, spinning its staff and entering a monk stance. Initiating fighting sequence. Level 2. The villain bots. Courtesy of Yui High School. These military-grade robots are designed by all the support course students throughout the year. First years design the 1-pointers, second years design the 2-pointers, and third years design the 3-pointers. Their attacks won't kill you, but it ain't gonna tickle either. 1-pointers. The victory bots, these monkey-style bots, are fitted out with wrist guns that are loaded with rubber bullets. They definitely know how to brawl as well. 2-pointers. The Imperial bots, these human-styled bots, are equipped with large, thick staffs and 3 different levels of what they lack in strength, they make up for in skill. 3-pointers. The Venator bots, these gorilla-style bots, have arms installed with jackhammer pistons in both their arms and legs for maximum damage. They can also make flashbangs, right? No point in waiting around, Izuku thought before pulling back, as the gorilla bot's fist came crashing down towards him. The strike missed, but the flash of light and explosion that followed it did take him off ground. Alright, didn't see that coming. Let's go. The greenette slid in between the three-pointer's leg before surging towards the one-pointers, not stopping when they began to shoot at him. Their rubber bullets simply bounced off Izuku's form as he rushed forward, and he instantly punched at the first one he ran into, making a donut out of it. The remaining trio of one-pointers didn't last much longer before they too fell to his strikes, all unable to get past his parrying and too slow to block his counter. Two tried to continue shooting at Izuku in vain, while the last made the mistake of throwing its tail at the greenette, giving him a wrecking ball that got rid of his one-pointer problem. Damn heroes. The remains of the robot, however, still apparently had some juice in it. I would have beaten you if it hadn't been for your immense power. There is no way they programmed them with dying lines. A sudden sharp ping went off on the back of Izuku's neck, and he soon found himself dodging to the left without meaning to. The sound of metal clashing rung around his right ear not a moment later, and he saw that the two-pointer from before had stabbed its staff down on where he just was. Unexpected evasion. Pursue immediately and initiate. Level 1, however, before the greenette could think on what had happened. The staff master had rushed up and started swinging at him wildly. Izuku didn't really pay attention to their strikes, though, as he could easily parry all of them without problem, even with it now spinning like a tornado and attacking without a pattern. No, what he was paying attention to was the fact that an electrical shock went off in his head before the bot even had the chance to reel back and swing at him that corresponded to where the staff would hit. Now, for a moment, the greenette simply let the situation play itself out, thinking he was kidding himself. However, after the third round of strikes, Izuku knew that whatever was happening wasn't a fluke and decided to leave it for now. After all, he had an exam to pass. Izuku suddenly swiped in front of him, creating a flash of wind that blew away the two-pointer's staff before spinning around and slamming his foot into the robot's side. The metal shattered at his strike, and the force shot the robot away, mangling their metallic form. Well, that went well. The greenette's right arm shot behind him, just after an electric shock pinged the back of his neck, and he felt a large and powerful fist enter his hand. Looking behind him, he saw that he had caught the three-pointer's fist, and it was rearing up for another one. Nope. Turning one for all down to 5% as he swung around. Izuku ducked under the second fist sent his way and sent a double backfist strike to the gorilla bot's solar plexus. The resulting shockwave shut down the three-pointer's circuitry and created a decent-sized crater in its chest before it simply fell down with its final message. D-damn heroes. And with that, Izuku had secured the first 9 points of the exam. Ha, that's gotta be a sign from the universe. He was just about to start moving when a large high-pitched sound rung off across all 4 mock cities. What are you all doing? Present Mike was standing on top of the observatory tower and was looking down at all of the examinees with what they could only assume was confusion. The exam has started, people. There are no countdowns in real life. Get moving. It was here that Izuku looked around and realized that no one else was in the mock city with him. The only other things in the city with him right now was an army of robots, and they were lining right up. I wonder if Akira already started. Battle Center Omega. Akira suddenly sneezed as he went to punch a three-pointer's stomach, making him force too much power into his strike than he intended. The result was a three-pointer crashing through multiple cars and other robots before landing in a gas station, which promptly blew up. Damn it. This is the worst time for my allergies to be working up, Akira thought before pausing, scratching his head. Wait, I don't have any allergies. Observation room. In the observation tower, a large building placed in between the 4 main training grounds, the faculty viewed the examinees with keen and judgmental eyes. Multiple hologram screens covered the front of the room and showed any student of interest that a teacher told it to. Seriously, how in the world could they mess up like that? Present Mike suddenly exclaimed as he walked back in the room, shaking his head. I mean, the gates very clearly opened to them. We had 1 student from 4 of the mock cities run in the moment they did. The screens changed on the blonde hero's statement and showed the 4 students that were currently in the lead of everyone else. Izuku Midoriya in Battle Center Beta, effectively disabling robot after robot with minimal force and heavy technique that could only come from years of martial arts training. Akira Hikaru in Battle Center Omega, flowing through lines of three-pointers with a staff stolen from a two-pointer with practiced ease. Katsuki Bakugo in Battle Center Delta, brawling with little to no technique, but attacking with no less power and actively hunting for the biggest robots. Fumikage Takoyami in Battle Center Alpha. Sitting in a meditative pose in a parking lot, while a dark beast emanating from his core threw away any robot that came near him. Those four are simply outliers. Nezu began as he watched the four aforementioned students' screens with unmasked glee. Powerful indeed. All four born and raised here in our great Shizuoka prefecture. A block-headed hero brought their screens forward towards himself and nodded in approval. This green-haired one has a good head on his shoulders. Even though his file says he can destroy a house with a punch, he's kept his collateral damage to basically zero. Well, that is certainly interesting. A hero with a cowboy hat on said, as he spun a gun mindlessly around his fingers. This kid right here is kinda the same, but he's got one of them rare healing quirks. The man laughed as he tipped his head to the hologram. Credit where credit's due. This here kiddo definitely has style. I like this one. A large hero in a yellow excavator suit said, crushing his fists together. He's definitely gonna be a tough one to handle if he gets in though. Doesn't look like much fun. A man in a trench coat in the back of the room was surrounded by screens of the fourth special examinee. He's a bit too reliant on his quirk, but he smiled underneath his mask as he watched the teen destroy a duo of one-pointers by himself. He'll be able to learn fast. You're all missing the point of this exam. An uninterested voice called from the back, their tone just on the edge of a yawn. We're not here to play favorites to a group of four that are doing what the bare minimum is for a pro hero. He started typing on his remote, and the number of screens related to the four reduced to what it originally was. Don't forget that. All Might, sitting at the front of the room, nodded at the tired man's statement. Aizawa is correct. His voice earned everyone's attention, and he stood up before walking to the middle of the room. We are not all gathered here to watch an impressive group of four. We are here to find a group 10 times bigger. The blonde stood in front of a big, shiny, red button before slamming his hand down on it. And make them heroes. Battle Center Beta. The ground was shaking. It was shaking, and all the normal robots had stopped attacking. Izuku's strange new sixth sense had given him a splitting headache, and he had just finished dealing with it when the quake started. All the villain bots had stopped their attacks, giving some examinees a much-needed reprieve, and started to move backwards to run away. By the time the rumbling ended, it didn't take long for the source of said rumbling to show itself. It was the zero-pointer. A large behemoth of steel and circuitry that was as tall as the Mach City buildings and as wide as the space between the streets. Looking at it properly, Izuku could easily estimate that it was at least 4 times Mount Lady's height, and it definitely looked like it packed a punch. Whereas the other villain bots looked distinctly humanoid and grounded, this robot looked like a military superweapon. A gigantic tank given an even bigger upper body completed by a singular, glowing red eye that bore down on the city below it. The zero-pointer. These robots are the combined inventions of the first year, second year, and third year support course departments and finished off by their head of department. Power loader. Z-pointer. The executor these robots reach beyond city buildings in height and pack terrifyingly strong punches, mostly because of the pistons in their arms. However, power loader made them with self-destruct buttons, just in case of worst-case emergencies. A trick he picked up from an old villain turned old inventor from some town called Gimmelstump, in the country of Drosselstein. Now, with all of this presented to the examinees, it should come as no surprise that they all started running away with fervor as soon as their bodies got over their shock, screaming and shouting all the way. It's way too big. Who in their right mind would make this? Fern, I know what we're doing after this exam. Really, Phileas? This. The zero-pointer cared not for their screams and instead reeled its fist back before sending it right into the ground in front of it. Just before it struck, though, the pistons inside of its arm shot outwards and completely obliterated the road. A wave of force and debris was the result of that piston-enhanced strike, and it was traveling fast towards the fleeing examinees. And they possibly could have caused a great deal of damage, had Izuku not been there. The full 40% of one for all that the green-haired teen could control coursed through his body as soon as he landed down in between the examinees and the zero-pointer. It charged in his right arm for a moment before he reeled back his fist and struck forward with a force of over 100 tanks, creating his own wave of force that sent the debris flying right back to its sender. Holes and tears were now visible on the robot's hull as the debris struck it, but it still stood and was now looking straight at Izuku. Present Mike said it's not worth anything. Everyone's safe now, so it's pointless to fight it. But the greenette did not stare back, simply powering down his quirk before turning to walk away. Help. Well, he would have walked away had that voice not reached his ears. One for All immediately flushed right back through Izuku's veins, and his eyes immediately started searching the area behind him to see who he had missed. Luckily for him, it didn't take long to spot what was out of place as he saw a pink-skinned girl struggling under a pile of rubble. However, the zero-pointer had noticed her as well, and its fist was already reared back. Izuku's heart sank at the sight, and he immediately shot forward as fast as he could. He barely registered arriving in front of the pink-skinned girl when he threw his hands up, catching the piston fist and standing his ground. With that handled, Izuku decided to deal with the real problem. Hi? Making sure he was secure in his position, he turned his head to the girl he was saving. Are you okay? At that moment, the pink girl had opened her eyes and saw what she thought was an impossible sight. Izuku, glowing like the sun and smiling widely, holding the zero-pointer's fist to keep her safe. She was frozen for a moment before the pain from her ankle broke her out of her stupor. No, the debris broke in my ankle and got it completely stuck. Izuku's figure jolted downwards for a moment as the zero-pointer's pistons went off again, and he grunted. Do you have a way to remove or get rid of the debris? He asked, resecuring himself. Damn, that was close. The girl looked at him in obvious worry before shaking her head. I do, but I'd probably melt my foot off while trying. She looked both sheepish and ashamed at the same time. Hey, that's fine. Izuku looked her right in the eyes and smiled as wide as he could, without looking like a complete fool. I'll be able to get you out of this. That's a promise. The pink veins of One for All began to intensify on the greenette's form, and he took slow, deep breaths. His glow grew stronger with each breath, and he suddenly crouched before shooting upwards, throwing off the zero-pointer's fist high into the air. Whoa, an action that didn't fail to put stars in the pink-skinned girl beneath him. Dude, that was crazy. Smile still on his face, Izuku crouched down again before jumping right up, meeting the zero-pointer's head immediately. Sorry there, pal. His body kept shooting upwards as float carried him beyond the city buildings, and he only stopped once he eclipsed the sun. But you're too dangerous. One for All began to flow solely to his legs, and they exploded with power before Izuku shot back down the zero-pointer. The greenette's speed was so instantaneous that the watching examinees and staff only saw a flash of green before the zero-pointer exploded, a very large hole in its chest. And that's when the exam ended. Time is up. Exam is over. We are done. Hearing that the exam was over and checking his job was done and double-checking that nothing was behind the zero-pointer to be crushed, Izuku decided to go back over to the pink girl. What greeted him when he arrived and removed the debris was an absolutely ecstatic young woman. Dude, that was so cool, the girl said as she sat up to a sitting position. You totally destroyed that thing. She flinched slightly at the end of her exclamation, and she looked back down to her ankle. I don't suppose you know how to fix an ankle, do you? Before Izuku could answer, a cane whacked him right on the back of his head. Certainly not. The healing is done by me. Recovery Girl had arrived on the scene and was shaking her head in exasperation. Every year, BGMI is getting too out of hand again. She made a mental note to hit him as well before looking at the girl before her. So, a broken ankle was it, dearie? The pink-skinned girl nodded as she rubbed the back of her neck sheepishly. Yeah, I was skating away, but the debris just caught me. It's not as bad as I thought it'd be though. Smiling at the girl's optimism, Recovery Girl leaned down and gave it a kiss, causing a light green glow to cover it. Well, now it won't be bad at all. Before throwing her a handful of gummies. Take these though. My quirk isn't perfect. It uses your own energy to speed up your body's healing. Oh, okay. If the pink girl was affected, she didn't show it and simply took down all the gummies at once. Thanks, ma'am. Recovery Girl smiled one last time before turning around to Izuku. I should be hitting you instead for what you did, Midoriya. She warned with her grandmotherly aura surrounding her before turning around to walk away. I know you're fine. Have a good day. Chuckling at the old lady's attitude, Izuku went to walk off as well. Hey, hold on a second. Before the pink girl slid right in front of him, arms and legs out like a starfish. You can't just walk away after saving my life like that, she pouted and poked him in the chest. I need to know your name. Now that Izuku wasn't in battle mode and saving the life of a fellow examinee, he finally was able to get a proper look at the girl standing in front of him. And she was beautifully exotic. She had fair, smooth, pink skin with slightly darker pink hair that was just as curly as the greenettes, covering up the base of two horns that protruded from her skull. Her curvaceous figure was supported by obvious muscle that contributed to an overall flexible build. All of this could easily make her mistakable for an alien. Then there were her eyes. Gorgeous, golden irises accentuated by her dark sclera that made Izuku feel like he was staring right into stars. All of this together promptly turned Izuku's face a shade of pink darker than that of girl's hair in front of him. "Izuku Midoriya," he exclaimed, trying to smile through the blush. "Stars, she's beautiful." The girl definitely saw his blush. There's no way she couldn't, and smiled back just as brightly. "Well, Midori, I'm Mina Ashido." She bowed down low before jumping right up to the greenette and bopping his nose with her finger. "Thanks for the save, cutie." "Oh, look at that. He's gotten even pinker." "That's probably red, actually." "No problem, Ashido." However, Izuku was able to keep his smile up, if just barely. "I'm just glad you didn't get hurt at all." Mina's smile lost its teasing edge and became softer. "Awa, that's really sweet of you." She brought her face right up to Izuku's and kissed his cheek before winking at him. "I hope you and I both get in, Midori. I definitely want to see you again." A light violet dusted her cheeks, and she quickly walked away. Bye, letting herself blush fully only after she turned around. He was so cute. I can't believe I just did that." And in her wake, she left a red-faced Izuku on the verge of passing out. "Stars, she kissed me." A large, goofy smile was on his face, and he had to take a minute to process what just happened before moving out of the arena. "Yes. You, Gates." Akira tapped his foot patiently to the beat of his favorite song as he waited for Izuku outside Yui's gates. "If he doesn't get here in the next minute, I'm gonna slap him." "Okay, maybe not patiently." Luckily for him, though, or Izuku, if you looked at it a certain way, it didn't take much longer after that thought before Izuku appeared, and he held up his arms. "Yo, Izuku." The greenette turned towards his friend and smiled as he saw him. "Akira." Izuku floated over to the black-haired teen, and his friend grabbed onto his arm as he flew over him, not stopping once. "How'd the practical go for you?" "PFFFT, please?" Akira laughed at the question. "Those villain bots didn't even stand a chance against me." He quickly readjusted himself and secured himself properly before pulling up and sitting on Izuku's back like a horse. "Though, I will admit, that zero-pointer was a bit harder." Izuku nodded. "Tell me about it." He quickly dodged to the left as a flock of birds flew at them. "I really liked the villain bot designs, though. I didn't think those websites were serious when they said the exams had military-grade equipment. One of my villain bots that I took out swore out at me before self-destructing." The black-haired teen said with a laugh. Got through half of its sentence saying, "Curse you, Perry," before turning off. He looked down to his friend and pat him on the back. "What about you? Anything interesting happened during the exam?" The greenette thought about it and was about to say no before he remembered a small detail about the exam. "Actually, yeah, something did," he said before picking up speed in his flight. "But we're gonna have to go home first." Akira shrugged. "Sure, why not? Turn on the thrusters." Izuku laughed before pushing off harder, shooting towards his home. Midoriya residence. The door to Izuku's room shut before locking. Akira raised his eyebrow and tilted his head at the action. "Is this like a super serious conversation or a super secret one?" Izuku went to his desk and grabbed his stress ball before throwing it at his friend. "Super secret one. Nothing terribly life-changing going on here." He gestured to the ball before showing the black-haired teen his back. "Throw the ball at my head as hard as you can." Akira's confused look remained on his face. "I'm sorry, what?" The green-haired kept his back facing his friend. "Throw my stress ball at my head as hard as you can," he repeated. "Come on, it's not like you haven't done that before." "Fair enough." Shrugging at whatever was happening, Akira silently reared back his arm before deciding to aim at his friend's butt. "It'd be too easy for him if I just went for the head," and throwing it as hard as he can. However, just as the ball was about to hit Izuku, his hips moved out of the way. "Hey, I said my head, not my butt." He turned around and glared right at Akira. "Huh?" Akira, though, just looked at him with confusion on his face. "Wait." He looked behind him and grabbed another ball before throwing it at his friend again. "Dude." This time, Izuku's hand went up before the black-haired teen threw the ball, and it sailed right into the greenette's hand. "Of course I'd be able to stop that. I'm not slow." Akira nodded slowly as he digested that before putting his hands in front of his face. "So," he waves his hands in the greenette's general direction. "What's with all of that? Honestly, I don't really have a clue, Izuku admitted with a shrug. But I'm pretty sure it's another quirk from One for All. That's the only logical explanation for it. All right, that makes sense. The black-haired teen tapped his chin as he thought about it. So, what, you have some sort of danger sense now? The greenette hesitantly nodded. Yeah, I guess I do. He sat down on his computer chair and tilted his head. I wonder whose quirk this was. It probably belonged to one of the first 4 users. Akira reasoned. It's a pretty simple quirk, and quirks like that are first-gen or second-gen quirk users from the dawn of quirks. He held up his phone and pulled up All Might's contact information. Though, if we want to confirm it, we could just call Yagi-sensei. Izuku shook his head at this and waved off his friend's phone. We're gonna need to learn how to handle these kinds of problems on our own, Akira, he said firmly. Yagi-sensei is a teacher now. He's got enough on his plate. Akira smiled before shrugging, tucking away his phone. All right, guess that's that dealt with then, he said as he stood up. I'll see you tomorrow for training then. Mum just said that she wants me home for dinner since Dad finally got a night shift off. Izuku also stood up and grabbed his earmuffs and visor out from his bag. All right, I'm up as well. I was thinking of going out for a fly. The 2 teens walked outside and Akira laughed as Izuku started floating off. You really like flying, don't you? Izuku nodded. Of course I do. He put on his visors and secured his earmuffs over his ears. It feels amazing up there. If you learned how to fly, you'd do the same thing. Akira simply shook his head before walking down the steps of his friend's apartment complex. Have a good flight, Izuku. I'll see you tomorrow. Izuku smiled back before doing a 2-finger salute. Peace, and promptly shooting off. Japan skies. Woo-woo, yeah, Izuku shot upwards as fast as he could again, throwing himself well beyond the clouds, before turning off float and letting himself fall down. Ha ha ha. Flying like this through the sky had become a favorite on Izuku's daily schedule ever since he got his flying license approved, and his mother judged that he was actually capable of flying safely. The greenette even flew to school every single day with Akira. It surprised him that no one caught him yet, though. His landings weren't exactly subtle. Up in the clouds, he could let his thoughts go and not worry about anything. His quirk, his future, the exam he just finished. That's what Izuku loved about the sky. It was what he wanted to be, free. Well, that's a spot-on explanation of what's great about flying, a voice said from next to the greenette as he cruised along. Great job, kid. Izuku continued to cruise unbothered for a moment, not even looking at the voice. Thanks. It's just so much, before doing a double take and snapping his head towards the person who was keeping up with him. Oh my stars, and freezing when he saw who it was. You're the wing hero, Hawks. A handsome man just shorter than Izuku with feathery, ash-blonde hair swept messily backwards, wearing what most would identify as an aviator's uniform sword right next to him upon his red feather wings. Yeah, that's me. Hawks is at your service. He twirled around a bit before maneuvering himself in front of the greenette and flying backwards. I do need you to answer this though. What are you doing up here? Izuku simply flew straight for a few moments, too impressed with the man's skill to register the question he was asked, before he shook himself out of his stupor. Oh, he sheepishly rubbed the back of his head. I'm just out here for a fly. I needed a way to relax. Hawks nodded, seemingly fine with the explanation, before moving his face closer to Izuku's. Well, do you have a flying license? He asked. I'm all for letting those who can fly do it, but, unfortunately, I do have a legal obligation to ensure you're approved by the HSC to be doing this. Ah! The greenette scrambled around his pockets before pulling out his phone and taking his license out of the case. Mei-chan, here it is. The red-winged hero grabbed the license and observed it for a moment before pulling a serious face, knowingly making Izuku fear for the worst. This, before smiling, is perfectly fine. He handed the green-haired teen his license back with a laugh. So, I was able to hear it kind of when you were mumbling. But what do you think of flying? Izuku put his license back in his phone and smiled as he did a few turns in the air. It's just so great up here, he exclaimed. Up here I can lose my worries. No anxiety, no problems, no stress from the UUE exam. The greenette shot upwards and the clouds circled with him. Up here I'm free like the sky. Hawks had a large smile as Izuku settled back down beside him and laughed heartily. That's what I'm talking about. You understand the freedom of flight. His laughs died down to a chuckle before he tilted his head. Hold on, UUE exam. You're a hero student. I'm definitely trying to be. the greenette said with a shrug. The results will be in next week, so until then it's all just a matter of patience. The red-winged hero thought for a moment before popping out a question. If you want to be free so much, why choose a career like heroism? He asked, head tilted. It doesn't exactly have an open schedule, and not all heroes have the grandest lives, despite what the media shows everyone. Izuku appreciated the man's honesty and smiled. I want to share the feeling of freedom I have with everyone. I want to be able to spread a smile on everyone's face and make them feel safe. Hawk's large smile had returned, but it turned softer as they continued to fly. Well, Yui, huh? He asked. Do you think you got in? I hope I did. The greenette started, twirling absent-mindedly. I wasn't really counting my points, but I think I got a lot. All I have to hope for is that destroying the zero-pointer doesn't take my points down to 0. A zero-pointer? Hawk's wings flashed, and he snapped his head towards Izuku. Every hero worth their salt knows all about the military-grade shenanigans Yui has running around their exams. You fought that thing power loader cooked up after a night out at the bar and won. Izuku tilted his head, but nodded. I mean, I didn't know that last part, but yes, I did indeed fight that thing. The ash blonde looked at Izuku a bit closely and flew all around him. Are you like a secret love child of Captain Celebrity? He asked, eyes squinted so tight one would think they were closed. Because that's the only way I can think someone that can fly would be able to take it out. Ah, well, one for all flowed right through Izuku's body, showing off his pink veins and making it glow bright. It's an energy-based quirk, stockpiling power constantly and letting me use it in a couple of different ways. I'm still figuring it all out. Figuring it all out after. Hawks did some math in his head before asking. What? 10 years of having your quirk? You've got to have a pretty good arsenal on you. The greenette's form flinched, and the red-winged hero tilted his head. Unless you're a late bloomer. Izuku kept a front up, but was a little nervous on the inside. Well, he cleared his throat before nodding. Yeah, 10 years later. The blonde's eyes bugged out of his head, and he once more flew straight in front of Izuku. 10 years, he flew in a circle around the greenette and started flying below him while looking up. And you've got enough control on it to take on Yui's exam. His wings flashed outwards, and he was immediately by the teen's side again. You're definitely getting into Yui then. Izuku blushed from the certainty in the pro's voice and tilted his head. You really think so? Of course I think so, Hawks exclaimed with fervor. A kid like you is hard to come by. Good heart, a will to save, and the potential to get his power under control in just about a year. Absolute catch for a hero school. He thought something for a moment before nodding and moving in front of Izuku. How about this? If I'm wrong and Yui doesn't want you, come to me. Waha. The greenette lost control for a second and fell down before leveling himself again. Go to you. Hawks nodded. If Yui lets a kid like you slip through its cracks, then I'll take you on and forge you into a pro myself. He stated, no sliver of a joke in his tone. Besides, it'd be nice to have another flyer around here in Fukuoka. Most of my sidekicks are walkers. A smile made its way onto Izuku's face, while internally he was ecstatic and embarrassed. Thanks a lot for the offer, Mr. Hawks, he said, trying to keep the red off his face from the praise. Ma, just call me Hawks. The red-winged hero waved him off with his own smile. I'm only 22. I'm more your senior classmate than I am a senior citizen. Izuku laughed loudly and rubbed the back of his head. Sorry, Hawks. He continued to fly straight for a few moments before his brain processed a specific detail in the pro's previous statement. Hold on. His eyes bugged out as he looked down. Am I in Fukuoka Prefecture? Ah, yeah. Taken off guard by the sudden outburst, Hawks raised an eyebrow. Are you not from around here? I'm from Shizuoka, Izuku exclaimed, taking out his phone and opening up his maps. Stars, how in the world did I end up all the way out here? His eyes traveled to the time, and he saw he had been flying for the better part of 2 hours. Oh. A laugh from the greenette's left shook him from his own shock, and he looked over to see Hawks laughing. You've got to have some serious speed and endurance if you can cross over from central Honshu and end up here in Kyushu. An explosion suddenly rung off from down below the clouds, and both Izuku and Hawks stopped their flight immediately. Hawks, come in, come in. And at the same time, a loud voice suddenly began to shout through Hawks' earpiece, loud enough for even Izuku to hear. Priority level 1, come in. What the hell? The red-winged hero put a hand to his ear as he began to dive. Artemis, What's going on down there? Down on the ground, a young, short, light-skinned woman with flowing red hair put one hand to her ear while the other reloaded her rifle. It's really weird, Hawks, the woman Artemis answered, jumping up and trying to shoot what appeared to be a very large bat out of the sky. There's these 3 monsters. They're not normal villains. They're way too strong. Her arrow zigzagged through the air before piercing the bat in its chest. It had no effect. Hawks grimaced and turned his head to the left to see Izuku following him before tapping his comms. I'll be down there soon. Stay safe. He cut the line and fully turned around to the greenette. Well, kid, I probably shouldn't be doing this, but I want to see what you're made of. Izuku tilted his head in confusion. What do you mean? According to my sidekick, I've got 3 monsters down there in my city. Hawk said, pointing towards Fukuoka City. And I want you to come down there with me to deal with them. The greenette's eyes widened, and he turned his whole body towards the hero. What? He looked back down to the city before looking at Hawks again. Is that even allowed? The red-winged hero shrugged. I'm pretty sure pro-heroes are allowed to give permission to civilians to use their quirks for assistance, or, in your case, hero student hopefuls. That way it's not vigilantism. His eyes, however, quickly became serious. Right now, are you in? Izuku didn't even have a second to actually think before his head started nodding. Yes. Great. Hawk's serious face still remained, but he now smiled. Then at that case, his wings opened up, and he suddenly started surging towards the city. You better be able to keep up. One for All immediately started to course through Izuku's body, and he charged up 20% before pushing off, landing him right into the heart of Fukuoka City, just behind Hawks by a few moments. What in the world? And what greeted the two was not a pretty sight. Standing across from Izuku and Hawks were 3. Well, as Artemis had accurately put it, monsters. All of them were extremely tall, lanky, and muscly humanoid-like figures with skin akin to that of a corpse. Wails like banshees were the only sounds to exit their mouths as they opened them. But their most prominent feature were their brains. More specifically, their very much exposed brains that weren't covered at all. 2 stood on the ground, chasing after fleeing civilians and cracking the ground as they moved. One had light gray skin with black pants with their muscles bulging and shrinking at sporadic intervals. It wasn't as loud as the other 2 and was eerily quiet. The other was about as big and buff as All Might, and had a dark fur over top a dark gray skin with a number of scars across its body. The final one was in the sky, light yellow skin tone with large, bat-like wings and claws on the end of their hands and feet. Every screech it made sent out waves of visible sound that exploded upon impact with buildings. At least, they would have had Hawks not surged in front of the soundwave arcs and cut them all. Kid, you take care of the 2 on the ground. The winged creature suddenly shot off at surprisingly fast speeds, and the red-winged hero grimaced. You got it? After receiving a nod, he shot off as well. Izuku watched Hawks disappear from sight before turning around to the creatures and letting One for All run through his body at 10%. Who are you? He asked, entering a side-on stance. And what are you trying to achieve here? The dark-skinned creature looked at Izuku before screeching and punching the ground, getting into a gorilla stance. Reg, ag. Before the green-haired teen had any time to unpack that disturbing sound, the creature shot forward, its gray-skinned friend not too far behind. The monster jumped up as it got close to Izuku and threw a hard punch downwards. Whoa, okay, Izuku caught it, but was surprised as he was moved back a bit before pushing the fist away and sending a focused double palm to the monster's chest. What, however, it seemed to do next to nothing as the gorilla creature stood there, unaffected. Og. Then its skin rippled and sent a shockwave right back at the green-haired teen's arm. That small moment of pain cost Izuku, as the gray-skinned creature was fast behind its friend and lunged through its legs right at the greenette. Its entire arm grew from lanky to buff as it reeled it back, and was positively huge by the time it struck out. The hit ringing true and sending Izuku back across the street before screeching. Next to it, the gorilla beast grumbled at it. Gah, Reg, before getting back down on all 4 of its limbs and knuckle walking over to Izuku. Rog, grrrr. The lanky creature's arm returned to normal size, and it got on all 4s before its legs grew. Og, and shot forward with surprising speed. However, Izuku was ready for it this time and dodged around its arm before hitting under it to uppercut the beast in the face, stopping its advance. The greenette continued with not a second wasted, and brought his arm up before elbowing the creature in the arm, breaking it completely before throwing it back. The gorilla creature didn't even spare its accomplice a glance as it knuckle ran over and tried to slam both of its arms down to squash Izuku. Remembering last time, the greenette instead decided to dodge backwards before shooting up at its face and kicking it square in the nose. Unfortunately, it had no effect again, and a ripple ran from its face all the way to its arm before it punched Izuku again, sending him back. What in the world? The greenette quickly caught himself mid-air with float and slowly lowered himself to the ground while checking out his opponents once more. It's gotten back up, and its arm. Izuku looked to the creature whose arm he had broken. It was fixed. And this one? He looked at the bigger creature and grimaced. Some kind of reflection quirk and definitely a gorilla mutation. Thinking more on the situation, as the creatures idly walked back and forth on the opposite end of the street, Izuku quickly categorized the monsters before coming up with a plan. It was done in seconds. What in the world are these strange creatures? Brain dead. Super powerful. Multiple quirks. We're not sure what they are, but it seems like Izuku's got them figured all out. Let's see what analysis he has cooking in his big brain there. Buff creature designation, Kong. Quirks. Ripple. This quirk seems to be letting Kong absorb whatever attacks Izuku throws at him right back to sender. It's like nothing's getting through to this guy. Gorilla. Kong's got the physiology and traits of a super-powered gorilla. He's walking on his knuckles and packing some really big punches. Lanky creature designation, Buffy. Quirks. Muscle pump. This quirk is apparently letting Buffy pump up all the muscles across his entire body, the same way All Might used to change forms. Regeneration. Izuku had definitely broken Buffy's arm there, but the thing just fixed it right up. He's got to have a regeneration quirk. Gaga, Bamo. Kong punched the ground in front of him before looking at Izuku and charging forward, cracking the road with every step. Brute force works to his advantage. Izuku side stepped the punch thrown at him before charging the full 40% of one for all strictly into his arms. But he has to have a limit. Redoing the move he used on Buffy, the greenette sent an uppercut under Kong's arm before reeling both his arms back and sending a double backfist to his solar plexus. Bag. Kong's chest visibly rippled wildly at the attack, and the wave traveled quickly across his skin. It wasn't long before his entire body became covered in rippling skin before it groaned, and a wave of force shot out from its chest, knocking it backwards. Ugh. Not wasting a moment, Izuku moved all the power he could into his right arm before charging forward and striking Kong right in the face, creating a shockwave of force from the contact. I think I got him. Izuku watched the gorilla beasts still form for a moment on the ground before sighing in relief. Alright, that actually worked. Danger sense, is that what I'm calling it now? Pained in Izuku's neck, and he slid to the left to avoid Buffy's large arms, smashing him into the pavement. Right, almost forgot. Bag hard. Buffy actually managed to get the ghost of a word out of its mouth before buffing up its entire body and rushing forward. Dog. Izuku caught the beast's arms with ease before slamming its head down on his knee. The shockwave emanating from the hit and the crunch he felt on his knee told him that the creature wasn't getting up from that. The greenette threw Buffy over to Kong and watched with slight trepidation as its face regenerated, but ultimately relaxed after it didn't get up. Alright, how do I restrain them? Izuku let One for All fade completely from his body and looked around for something to bind the creatures with. Oh, before smiling as he saw two uprooted stop signs. Perfect. Grabbing the signs up from the ground, the greenette bended the metal poles around both creatures with ease. It was that moment that Hawks decided to fly down, feathers looking ruffled and his general appearance scuffed up. Hey, kid! He landed down next to Izuku and smiled at the restrained beasts. Good work. You clean up pretty well. Izuku smiled at the praise before noting the absence of the winged creature. What happened to the other one? He asked, tilting his head. Did it get away? The ash blonde sighed and reluctantly nodded, a grimace on his face. Yeah, it was a complete embarrassment. His feathers spiked outwards before they all settled. Every time I thought I had it cornered, some weird purple mist came in and wisped it off to another part of the city. A warping quirk? Izuku asked, wonder and worry written all over his face. Those quirks are so rare. And if a villain had it, he shivered at the possibilities that could bring if someone evil was competent with that kind of quirk. Yeah, it was definitely a warping quirk. Had to be if it could get past me. Hawks nodded, grimace still on his face. But I'm pretty sure that weird creature didn't make them. It looked confused every time the purple mist surrounded it. He looked over to the unconscious creatures before looking back to his temporary partner. What about you? Any complications like that? The greenette shook his head, still deep in thought. I didn't have a warping problem. He thought it over before nodding. The only problem was that these Things seem to have more than one quirk. Luckily for Izuku, Hawks nodded. Yeah, I get what you mean. My one had flight, and was wailing loud enough to create sonic waves. He flew over to the creatures and rubbed his feathers over them, while closing his eyes in concentration. Well, we're definitely going to need to tell the police that for the report. Izuku's eyes went wide once more at the amount of responsibility the pro seemed fine with giving him. He pointed at himself with his head tilted. Really? Hawks tilted his head right back. Yes, really. I'm not letting you leave me with all the explaining, he said, moving away from the creatures as 3 cop cars and a containment truck drifted onto the scene. I love protecting people, but the less paperwork the better. 2 groups of armored police officers immediately ran out from the trucks with large restraints on them before splitting themselves up between the 2 unconscious creatures and moving them. As they did, a group of cops from 2 of the cars began to work on crowd control, while a single lone officer walked up. Good evening, Hawks. The officer in question was a dark-skinned woman with frizzy black hair running all the way down to the bottom of her back, turning to white at the tips. Care to shed any light on what happened here? Her blue eyes traveled over to Izuku. And who this is? Hawks simply smiled at the woman. Good evening to you as well, Detective Sakishi. He walked up and did a low, dramatic bow before getting up. Now I could tell you what happened, or, the man held out his arms. You could take a look yourself. The detective, Sakishi, sighed before walking to one of the cracks in the road and placing her hand on it. As soon as she did, her eyes glowed white and a soft wind blew around her. It continued for a few moments before the light show dropped, and she walked back over to Izuku and Hawks. Well, that was certainly something. Izuku tilted his head and looked to Hawks, the latter simply smiling. What was that about? Hawks wrapped his wing around Izuku and pulled him in. That little. He paused as he realized that he didn't have Izuku's name. Wait, I didn't catch your name. Izuku Midoriya. The greenette answered. Right, anyway, little Midoriya. Hawks continued without missing a beat, and his other wing dramatically flared before pointing at Sakishi. This is Detective Sakishi Kozai. What she just did was use her quirk. Sakishi Kozai. Literal meaning. Past sight of crafted wood. One of Fukuoka City's best detectives, and one of the youngest detectives in the entire world. She was only 19 when she got the promotion from patrol cop to detective, and she's been cleaning up Fukuoka streets for 2 years since. Quirk. Voice of all things Sakishi's quirk lets her hear the events of what happened in whatever setting she's in by focusing on the voice of the environment. She can also use this quirk on people to see clearer flashes of images, more akin to a movie of their past. Yup, that's me, Sakishi exclaimed with a smile. You got pretty lucky there, Midoriya. 2 dual quirk monsters are a hard takedown. She wrote down everything in her notepad before putting it away. You're also lucky Hawks is here to say he gave you permission to use your quirk. Izuku nodded before turning to Hawks and bowing. Thank you for giving me this opportunity, Hawks, he exclaimed loudly, and with a smile before standing up. I hope I lived up to your expectations. The red-winged hero laughed heartily and pet the teen on the back with one of his wings. Midoriya, you did good, he said before nodding at Sakishi. Is that all you need then, detective? Because the kid and I unfortunately have another problem to deal with. Media vans had swarmed around them and were just waiting for the police to drop their guard so that they could get through to what they could all sense was a juicy story. Oh, yeah, definitely don't want to get roped into that. Sakishi offered the 2 a low bow before quickly sprinting to her car. Good work, Hawks. You as well, Midoriya. Her vehicle's engine roared as she floored her gas pedal. I hope to see you in Fukuoka more as a proper hero soon. And as she drifted off, her fellow officers took the signal and rushed back to their cars before speeding off, sirens creating a path for them out of hell. Effectively, they left Izuku and Hawks to the vultures. Take a deep breath, Midoriya, Hawks said as he ran a hand down his face. A hero will have to banes to their existence. He sighed and slowly started to stand up taller before putting a smile on. Paperwork and the media. Hawks, Empire Editorial. Who were the villains you fought today? Rebellious report. Hawks. Is this child here a new sidekick you're taking on? Hey, kid. Aldera articles. Where are you from? Izuku took a breath before putting up a smile. Damn it. 10 minutes later. All right, folks, Hawks suddenly said, spreading his wings and jumping up into the air. Unfortunately, that's all the time the kid and I have to answer questions. I've got to get him back home. He looked at Izuku and gestured for him to start flying. Stay safe, everyone. And with that, they both shot up as fast as they could, until they were once more above the clouds. Those articles are going to be trending by tomorrow, Izuku said with a groan, hands on his face. Everyone at school is going to see them. And he had almost made it to graduation without anyone knowing. Don't worry about it, kid, Hawk said as he flew underneath the green-haired teen. With how the locals were reacting to you, I'd say you better get used to being famous. He turned around and flew up so that Izuku could see his smile. You did a good job today. I've got a bunch of second and third year hero students down here at my own hero school that wouldn't have handled what you just did. Izuku's face went red at the praise he received, and he tried to awkwardly bow his head. Thank you, Hawks. Right? You better get yourself home, Hawk said as he watched the sun begin its set. I hope I can see you again soon, Midoriya. He slowly started gliding downwards while waving goodbye. And remember what I said. I'll take you if Yui doesn't. And with that, he was gone, leaving Izuku with a big smile on his face as he shot towards his home. It took a while, and the last lights of the sun were fading away by the time he landed on his level of the apartment complex. His smile remained as he walked through the door, and was about to greet his mother when he saw her in the living room. She was watching the news. Oh crap! Izuku slowly closed the door behind him and activated float before slowly moving towards his room. All right, stay calm. You just have to. Izuku, sweetie. The voice of his mother stopped the greenette in his tracks, and he turned to see her staring at him. She was holding a rolling pin. You've been gone all day. What have you been up to? The calm tone and serene smile on her face did nothing to calm Izuku's racing heart. Just hanging out with Akira, the greenette said, a large, forced smile on his face. We decided to hit the gym after the Yui exam, and then we. And so, the day was saved by Hawks and the young 15-year-old Izuku Midoriya. The TV cut off the green-haired teen's lie, and he really wished he hadn't stayed for an interview. Will this kid be a new regular in Fukuoka? The locals sure hope so. Izuku slowly started to back away again, still floating above the ground, with his hands up. I can explain, before shooting off to his room. Izuku Midoriya, Inko shouted as she chased her son, jandals and wooden kitchen appliances floating behind her. You come back here right now. Izuku was grounded for a week. Midoriya residence, 1 week later. Izuku sat on the couch in his living room with his notebook in hand, watching his fight against the 2 monster villains that he had fought a week ago. As it turns out, lots of people in Fukuoka were recording the fight he had. This meant that the greenette had multiple videos from several different angles to analyze to see if there was anything in his fighting style he could improve. Unfortunately, depending on how one looked at it, it also meant that Izuku had been trending over the hero boards all week. He had his own sub-board now with #Izuku Midoriya and #Emerald Fury being the most popular tags. Someone had also managed to pull both the footage of Izuku rescuing Bakugo from the sludge villain and his performance at the Yui exams out, and put it on his sub-board as well. All of that led to his entire school learning Izuku had a quirk, and one of the most awkward weeks of school the greenette had ever experienced. Akira just looked done with him, and Bakugo had spent every minute outside of class standing on the school building's roof, looking down at the ground with, well, it was hard to tell what his emotions were when he wasn't displaying annoyance. Izuku. The door to the greenette's apartment glowed green before bursting open, revealing his mother. Izuku. Ma. Izuku quickly turned off the TV and vanished his notebook to whatever pocket dimension he kept them in, not eager for another lecture on safety. What's up? He asked with a forced smile. Luckily, his mother either didn't notice or didn't care. It's here, your results. And instead opted to show him an envelope with Yui's logo in gold on the front. Yui finally sent their letter. What? The greenette lost his forced smile and his eyes widened. Oh my stars, it's finally here. He took the letter from his mother's hands before just looking at it and taking deep breaths. Come on, don't think about it. No anxiety. Just open it. And then he ripped it in half. Izuku, Inko smacked her son on the back of his head. You just ripped your letter, however, instead of 2 ripped pieces of paper falling out of the envelope. A small metal disc hovered out before positioning itself on the coffee table. Or not. Before either Midoriya could think on that though, the disc started flickering with lights before a hologram shot out of it, revealing. Ha 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 ha, I am here. As a projection. All Might. All Might? Inko looked at the hologram in shock, and she grabbed her son's shoulders. Oh my goodness, is All Might going to be teaching my little boy? The large blonde in the hologram struck a pose and smiled widely. "Let's talk about your results on our exam now, young Midoriya," he exclaimed, pointing to a TV next to him. "Your results on our theoretical portion were incredible. One of the brightest minds to step foot in that hall." A list of results came up and showed Izuku's name in the top 1% of all examinees. The man's praises and the results shown put tears in Inko's eyes, and she immediately hugged her son tightly. "Aw, I'm so proud of you, my little Einstein." She ignored the teen's cries of protest of not being able to breathe. He was just being dramatic, probably. "However, your performance in the practical portion was nothing short of extraordinary." All Might continued, the screen switching to multiple videos of Izuku expertly disabling the villain bots. "A villain point score of 70 points. That alone would have been enough to get you in." Izuku cheered and smiled widely. "Yes, I did," before tilting his head as his mentor's words were properly processed in his brain. "That alone." The symbol of peace came back on the screen before pointing to the TV next to him again. "But we didn't just score you on villain points." A video of Izuku saving a number of examinees from the villain bots, and the pink-skinned girl Mina, if he remembered from the zero-pointer, came up. "You, young Midoriya, went out of your way to save examinees throughout the test. How could we not reward such heroism?" The hologram again changed and showed the leaderboard. Examination results. Let's see what hero hopefuls managed to get top score on Yu Yu's entrance exam. First place, Izuku Midoriya 70 villain points and 70 rescue points. Second place, Akira Hikaru 64 villain points and 40 rescue points. Third place, Katsuki Bakugo 83 villain points and 0 rescue points. Fourth place, Ejiro Kirishima 40 villain points and 38 rescue points. Fifth place, Fumikage Tokoyami 53 villain points and 20 rescue points. "Congratulations on first place, young Midoriya," All Might exclaimed, his patented smile doing well to hide how proud he truly was. "Welcome to Yuyui, your hero academia." The disc shut off, and a silence set in the Midoriya household. For a moment, neither spoke and simply sat there until Inko crushed her son once more in a bone-cracking hug. "You did it, Izuku. You made it into Yuyui." Tears flowed out of her eyes like a river, and she sobbed. "My little hero." And for once, Izuku didn't mind his ribs poking against both of his lungs and hugged his mother back. "I did it." Takoba Beach. Izuku and Akira both arrived at the beach. The afternoon sun well into the sky and a beautiful sheen on the water's surface. All Might had called them here after he was sure they'd have their results to both congratulate them and ask them about something now that he wasn't deep in paperwork. "Young Midoriya, young Hikaru." The man in question was standing on the patio, staring out at the ocean with soft eyes. "It's good to see you again, my dear boys." The two teens smiled and ran up to him before bowing. "It's nice to see you as well, Yagi-sensei," they both said at the same time. All Might turned around to face them and smiled back before kneeling down next to them. "I want to congratulate you two for how well you did on the exam. Scores such as yours are to be celebrated." He ruffled both of their heads, turning their hair into more of a mess than it was before. "And I also wanted to ask if One for All had any developments since I last saw you." "Oh, it has," Akira said, shaking his head to try and get his hair back to normal. "Izuku got another one of the previous holder's quirks during the entrance exam." All Might's eyes widened before turning to Izuku. "Is this true?" At the greenette's nod, he hummed. "What is it?" Izuku scrunched his nose. "Well, I don't actually know, but from what we can tell so far, it seems to be like some sort of danger sense quirk." He started, pulling up the videos of his performance at the entrance exam from his subboard. "I think it works by sensing someone or something's malicious intent against me, and then giving me a warning. Sometimes it'll forego that and just move my body before I even tell it to." I see," All Might hummed, writing down notes in a journal he definitely didn't have on his person beforehand. "Danger sense, malicious intent, instinct." The notebook suddenly vanished, and he looked back at the teens. "Anything else of note?" Izuku was about to object, but Akira cut him off immediately. "Oh, absolutely." He pulled out his phone and showed the large blonde the greenette's new subboard, including the fight against the monsters. Izuku ended up flying all the way out to Kyushu and fought these things. All Might's smile disappeared, and a serious look crossed his face. "Young man, acts of vigilantism are—" "Wait, no," Izuku quickly exclaimed, shaking his hands in front of him. "Hawks was there. He let me use my quirks, and the FCPD were fine with it." The large blonde let out a long sigh that turned into a groan at the end. Of course he did. Of course they were. All Might had done a patrol in that city on his whole country tour after he was healed and back to normal. That one patrol was all he needed to get an idea on what the young man was like. That entire city is filled with the most laid-back heroes and officers you'll find in Japan, and the most effective. He whispered the last part under his breath. Well then, how did you like your first villain fight? It was weird seeing as they weren't exactly villains. Izuku started, uncertainty in his tone. They were more like monsters. Their colors made them look like corpses. The greenette grabbed Akira's phone and paused on the part of him having a standoff against the creatures. That one on the left had his gorilla quirk and an absorption and release quirk. The other had a muscle augmentation quirk and a regeneration quirk. By the end of his explanation, All Might's eyes had gone just the slightest bit wider, and a pit set in his stomach. They had multiple quirks? Apprehension, no. Fear lined his tone as he asked. But neither Izuku nor Akira could hear it. Those things definitely weren't natural. They were barely able to get out a single word and moved like ragdolls. He explained, turning off the phone and giving it back to Akira. Whatever they are, someone made them. I just don't understand how that could work though. Medical technology is good, but if someone is capable of doing this, Akira started. They'd have to be a medical genius and have access to experimental medical technology that even David Shield wouldn't think of making. Seeing the boy's distress, All Might quickly forced a smile onto his face and placed his hands on their shoulders. It's best not to worry about this, boys. He started, hoping they would listen. I'll take a look into this myself. You two, however, should get home and send in your hero costume designs. Luckily for the blonde, they took the bait. Oh, yeah, our hero costumes, Izuku exclaimed, pulling out his notebook from the notebook dimension he kept in his back pocket. An action Akira copied. We have to do proper sketches now and make sure all the details are there, he said, flipping the pages of his notebook through several designs, each one getting more complicated before closing it. We'll see you at school then, Yagi-sensei. Izuku bowed before grabbing Akira's hand and flying off. Bye, Yagi-sensei. All Might waved them goodbye and kept his act up until they were specks in the sky. If this means what I think it does, phantom pain from his scar flared lightly for the first time in months. He can't possibly be alive. A halls, 1 month later. Dude, we're actually here, Izuku said, standing in front of a giant door with one on it. Like, we got our results and everything, but... Akira nodded. I know what you mean. I can't believe we're actually about to step in here as well. He was taking deep and fast breaths before a soft golden glow became visible through his uniform. All right, that's better. I wonder who's going to be in here with us. The greenette thought aloud, remembering all of the examinees he saw during his own exam, and a certain pink-skinned one. I hope they're all nice. I hope it's not Bakugo or that blue-haired guy. Akira added, hands in a praying position. I checked the boards, they both got in. All I can hope for now is that they're in 1B instead of 1A. Izuku shrugged, an accepting look on his face. Let's be honest, as much of an asshole he is, Bakugo is actually trying to be a hero. He admitted this with no sense of hurt pride or disgust. Besides, we've basically grown up with the guy. I've gotten used to him. The black-haired teen waved his best friend off. Ma, let a guy dream. Before putting his hand on the door and pushing it open. All right then, here we go. Take your legs off that desk immediately. Akira sighed. Damn it. Unfortunately for the black-haired teen, the blue-haired teen from the entrance exam was in their class. Such actions are disrespectful to the upperclassman that once sat in those very chairs and was lecturing Bakugo, an action that the blonde was visibly livid at. The hell did you just say to me, glasses? Bakugo barked out with a scowl, sitting up just to properly see who had the audacity to talk to him like that. What makes you think I give a shit about any of that? He scoffed and tilted his head. And what middle school stuck that stick up your ass? The blue-haired teen looked at Bakugo with an appalled face, the appropriate reaction for people meeting the blonde for the first time before quickly schooling his features and holding out his hand. I believe that we've gotten off to a bad start. My name is Tenya Ida. I attended Sumi Private Academy. Ah, okay. Bakugo nodded with a soft smile on his face, bleeding red flag. Sumi are the ones that shoved that stick up there. He held out his hands and small sparks danced around his palm, while his smile immediately became a grin. Don't worry, I'll knock it out for you, you elitist fuck. Once more, glasses, well, Ida reeled back in obvious shock and appallment. Such foul language, he karate chopped the air as he spoke. Are you sure the hero path is the best path for you? Before Bakugo could even begin to rage at that question, his nerd sense went off, and he looked towards the door. Fuck. And immediately lost any and all energy he had before sagging his head in defeat. I must have pissed off a deity or something. Why does the world do this to me? It's great to see you as well, Bakugo, Izuku said sarcastically, having heard the blonde's words despite his whispering. I can't wait for another year of us being such good friends and pushing each other to the limits. Akira nodded, not even bothering to put up a fake smile. He sucked at them anyway. I'm going to enjoy any and every fight we have, should we have any. Bakugo was about to start a tangent, but Ida suddenly appeared in front of Izuku and Akira. Ah, it's you two, from the exam. He stepped back before executing a perfect right-angle bow. I would like to sincerely apologize for my behavior towards you two at the exam. The teen stood up straight, and there was a light pink on his cheeks. I acted out at you, because I was extremely nervous at the prospect of failing the exam and went out of line. Izuku and Akira both looked at each other before the latter sighed. No bad blood, pal. The black-haired teen stuck out his hand with a small smile. I'm Akira Hikaru. Izuku just waved. Izuku Midoriya. Ida nodded and went to shake Akira's hand. Tenya Ida. Midori, before being immediately cut off by a very loud and cheery voice behind all of them. I knew I recognized that cute mess of a forest you got on your head. Turning around, the three were greeted by the sight of the pink-skinned girl Izuku had met at the exam. Oh, Ashido. The green-haired teen smiled widely at her and waved, a little red in the face at her previous comment. You got in. Mina nodded before skipping up and poking the other teen in the chest. And I have you to thank for actually being here. Don't go and forget that. She smiled at the blush she saw on Izuku's face and poked her tongue out at him. I'm really happy we're in the same class. Izuku quickly calmed his nerves and did his best to not blush too hard before responding. I am as well. The two both just stood there for a moment, looking into the other's eyes and reading their emotions without any thought to anything around them. Their proximity also put them basically chest to chest well. Izuku was taller, so more like chest to face, and they could both feel the other's body heat. Nobody missed this. I should have gone to Shiksu. Bakugo looked like he was on the verge of throwing up, and was visibly gagging. I must have pissed off the creator himself. There ain't no fucking way. Meanwhile, Akira was smiling as a dormant part of his brain opened. He was a ruthless tease to people he was comfortable with. It's finally happening. Composing himself, the black-haired teen peeked his head over Izuku's shoulder. Hi, I'm Akira Hikaru. What's this happening here? His introduction knocked the two teens out of their trance, and they both stepped back with a light blush visible on both their cheeks. Midori here saved me from the 0-pointer at the exam. Mina was the first to recover, though, to answer the other teen's question. He stopped its fist from crushing me before destroying it with a single punch. Akira nodded. I see. While a soft smile was on his face, he was inwardly grinning. I see. Whoa, he did what? However, Mina's exclamation seemed to gather the attention of some of their other classmates. You've got to be pretty strong and manly to pull off something like that. This one was a guy with spiky red hair and shark teeth spread out in a wide smile. The next was a blonde-haired teen next to him with a black lightning streak in his parted hair. Yeah, taking on something like that is, however, the teen stopped as soon as he actually looked at Izuku. No way. His surprised tone and face took Izuku off guard. Hi. The greenette waved awkwardly, a confused look on his face. It's you. Unfortunately, the greenette had to deal with another classmate looking at him with stars in his eyes. This one a teen with strangely shaped elbows and black hair. You're the Forest Fury of Fukuoka, the Izuku Midoriya. Oh right. I completely forgot about that sub-board. Izuku became red in the face as the three teens all surrounded him and began to bombard him with questions and praises. You've got to be the youngest unofficial hero in Japan. Dude, what's your quirk? Flight and super strength are absolutely broken. I can't believe you did the entrance exam and that fight in the same day. Super manly, man. Are you related to Captain Celebrity or All Might or something like that? You also had that fight against that sludge guy. Didn't you save that angry blonde guy over there? Hawks said he'd invite you to his agency. Are you contracted to him already? Izuku immediately became overwhelmed by the three, and he felt his social battery drain fast. Sweet stars, someone send a savior. He tried his best to smile through their social onslaught, but wasn't doing well. This is almost as bad as the media after the danger sense pinged in the back of Izuku's head, hitting him like a truck, and he quickly turned around to find what caused it. However, the only thing the greenette could spot was a very sleep-deprived-looking black-haired man in a yellow sleeping bag lying on the floor. His action of turning around did not go unnoticed by the 3 teens that were socially assaulting him, or Akira, Mina, and Ida. All at once, the 6 also turned around in silence to simply stare at the yellow caterpillar human on the floor with tilted heads. Then their sudden silence spurred the rest of the class to quiet themselves, and they all looked towards the door to see what the commotion was or, well, the lack thereof. It was in this moment of silence that everyone decided it'd be best to just sit down and cease conversation. They didn't really know why they felt that way, but their brains had moved their bodies back into their seats before they knew it. And that is when the bell decided to ring. For the sake of saving Izuku from sitting behind Bakugo, and other reasons he has switched seats with Tsu, and will be sitting behind Mina. Akira has also taken Ida's desk, placing him behind Izuku and in front of Ochako, while Ida takes Minta's desk. You're welcome for removing him. As soon as the bell's ringing had ended, the black-haired man at the door had stood up and removed his sleeping bag before walking up the podium. Well, this is certainly a first. He made it to the front and looked out at the class with a small nod. It's nice to see that you can all silence yourselves. I like that. I'd decided to be the one to vocalize the thoughts going through every student in the room. Who are you supposed to be, sir? My name is Shota Aizawa. The black-haired man started. And I will be your homeroom teacher for your time here at Yui. It's a pleasure to meet you all. His words were delivered with a very flat and monotone voice, and no one could tell if he was being serious or sarcastic. Now, however, they couldn't think on it for long since he pulled out multiple PE uniforms before throwing them at everyone. Get to the PE grounds in the next 5 minutes or else. He decided to leave the last part to his students' imagination and walked out. Well, all right then. Though confused, Izuku and Akira both got up and started making their way over to the changing room. The former was humming a happy tune at seeing his request for having the winter version of the PE uniform for the entire year accepted. It took just short of 3 minutes after that before the rest of the class finally snapped into gear and ran to the changing rooms. PE grounds. When the rest of the class arrived at the PE grounds, they were all greeted with the sight of Izuku and Akira stretching and limbering up, and an irritated Aizawa. I am not going to ask why Midoriya and Hikaru were the only ones who happened to arrive on time. The black-haired man started, taking a deep breath. I'm just going to ask that you all work on your timing for next time. The class was silent for a moment before a short girl with bobbed brown hair meekly raised her hand. Aizawa-sensei. She looked like she was going to fold in on herself as her teacher directed her flat look at her. Yes, Yuraraka, Aizawa replied with a tired tone. What is it? The brown-haired girl Ochako apparently gulped before speaking. I was just wondering what we're doing here outside. Aren't we going to miss out on our orientation? No. Aizawa's fake laugh actually sent a chill down a few of his students' spines. Orientation and events of similar nature are irrelevant to those in the hero course. Trust that you'll never attend one of those if you remain in my class. He straightened his back and brought out a tablet from somewhere. And answering your first question, we are out here to be performing a quirk apprehension test. The entire class tilted their heads at him, and all spoke at once. A what? What the hell was a quirk apprehension test? It's simply just the basic tests you all would have done in middle school, nothing strenuous. Aizawa answered, pulling out a softball. Katsuki Bakugo. His eyes traveled to the explosive blonde. You had the most villain points on the entrance exam. What was your highest softball throw in middle school? Bakugo looked down and sighed in disappointment. 68 meters. He was disappointed in both the fact that his score was behind Izuku and Akira, and that his score was one off from, damn it. Right. Aizawa threw the ball at Bakugo before pointing out at a throwing pitch in the middle of the field. I want you to go stand in that circle and throw that ball as hard as you can, with your quirk. Any semblance of disappointment disappeared from Bakugo's face, and was replaced with a grin as he felt the ball in his hand. With my quirk, huh? He asked as he walked up to the pitch, feeling the sweat on his arms set in. No problem. Izuku and Akira both rolled their eyes as the blonde reeled his arm back. Oh great, before they both covered their ears. Here we go. Bitch. Bakugo reeled his right arm back before rotating it by the elbow before revolving it in a full circle. building and moving as much sweat as he could to his hand before completing his throw. Die! And as he let the ball go at the apex of his throw, a large, shockwave-generating explosion rocked from his palm and shot the ball forward at incredible speeds. Aizawa watched the distance on his tablet grow, with a nod before the number stopped. "If you all want to be heroes, then you need to know your limits," he said as he showed the class the result. "Then you leave it to me to work you so hard that you push through them." Softball throw results. Katsuki Bakugo, 1032.0 meters. The result Aizawa showed sent the three musketeers from before, and a select few others, into a frenzy of compliments and exclamations of excitement. "He got over a kilometer. That dude's quirk is insane. That was super manly. Do we actually get to use our quirks? This is going to be fun." The last statement caused Aizawa's head to snap over to the class, and he fixed a hard glare on them all. "Did you say this would be fun?" His tone immediately silenced the class, and they all felt a shiver run down their spines. "All right then, let's make it even more fun." It didn't help the class that the man's black eyes started glowing red, making the students feel as though their souls were being stolen. Whoever places last in this test will be expelled. Immediate panic set into the students' hearts, and they all burst out with shouts. Izuku might have as well, but Akira knocked him upside the back of his head before he could start, earning the black-haired teen a half-grateful, half-annoyed look. However, they quickly schooled themselves, and both went to look for any signs of deceit or deception in their teacher's eyes. Unfortunately for them, the man looked dead serious. "Great." The two teens both looked at each other before nodding and bumping their fists together, large smiles on both of their faces. "Let's do this." Unbeknownst to them, Aizawa saw this. Good. And he was smiling. "It's nice to see that I have a small handful of students that can keep their composure. More than I could say for last year's class." The black-haired man turned back to the rest of his class and fixed their panic with a glare. "Argue all you want, but what I say is final. Us teachers here at UUE have the freedom to teach how we wish. You need to know that this path to becoming a hero isn't an adventure of sunshine and rainbows. It's hard work, harsh training, and high standards." The class was completely silenced by the end of their teacher's triad, and a few of them had their heads down with slight shame. Damn. However, they couldn't fret on anything for long as Aizawa's eyes stopped glowing, and he started putting eye drops in them. "Now let's get this class started and move on to the first trial." He looked towards Izuku and Akira before pointing to a track. "Midoriya, Hikaru, you got here first, so you'll be the frontrunners on this trial. 50-meter dash is first up. Don't hold back." There was emphasis at the end of his statement. "Yes, Aizawa-sensei." Izuku and Akira both bowed before moving towards the track and letting their quirks run through their body. A visible glow took over Izuku's body, and pink veins could be seen on his face as he decided to charge the full 40% of One for All. With Akira, his heart began to glow. A great gold and thin gold veins spread out across his entire body with all the power he could manage. And as soon as the signal went off, they surged. Two craters formed at their push-off, and a large flash of wind nearly sent a few of their classmates back, making them cover their eyes for a moment. It was in that small moment that they passed the finish line. 50-meter dash results. Izuku Midoriya, 0.21 seconds. Akira Hikaru, 0.83 seconds. Holy shit, that was so fast. Dude, they got in under a second. Such speed, incredible. And, needless to say, their results shocked the entire class. Underneath his scarf, Aizawa was hiding a smirk at the numbers he was looking at. However, he schooled himself and stopped his other students from asking questions by moving them through the trials. As he did, Izuku had immediately pulled out his notebook and began to analyze his classmates as they ran. While most of their quirks weren't built for speed, the Greenette was impressed by their creative use of their power to get around that fact. The most impressive time was actually Ida. He had what seemed like engines sticking out of his calves, which sent him over the line in 3.04 seconds. After that, Aizawa decided to move them onto the grip strength test with Izuku and Akira first up again. Their teacher looked away for a second to reprimand a thick-lipped student and a blonde with a brown-furred monkey's tail for talking, and was greeted by an interesting sight when he turned back around. "Sorry, Aizawa-sensei," Izuku said with a sheepish expression on his face. An expression Akira also had as he rubbed the back of his neck. "We thought they'd be stronger." They were both holding up the grip strength tests. They were broken. Grip strength test results. Izuku Midoriya, error. Akira Hikaru, error. Aizawa looked at them with a sigh and nodded in acceptance. That's coming out of my paycheck. Before turning to his tablet and typing in their results. Grip strength test results. Izuku Midoriya. Yes. Akira Hikaru. Yes. Once more, Izuku took out a notebook and began to take notes. The class had interesting quirks. The red-haired one from before had some sort of hardening quirk, which amplified his strength a bit, and the thick-lipped kid had digested a load of sugar before his muscles grew. However, the most noticeable, and were they noticeable, was a teen with 6 arms that created an army of hands on one side of his body that got very close to crushing the grip tester, and an onyx-haired girl who created a hydraulic press from her body to crush the test to scraps. The next most noticeable test after that was the standing long jump, where most of the class showed off that they were all very capable in the field of mobility. A quiet teen with a mountain-shaped head was meekly standing before the pit before shifting forms into a large, bald-headed eagle and flying over it. Another quiet teen, this time one with purple hair, had shot out what looked like waves of sound after her jump, which sent her well over the pit. Her landing was a bit of a mess though. Finally, the last interesting one was a green-haired girl with a frog-like attitude that simply jumped very high. Many others with emitter quirks similar to Bakugo's used the force of their power to give themselves temporary flight, while others simply jumped over the box. Overall, the entire class was able to pass the test without problem. After this, the rest of the test went by smoothly. The distance run was tiring for everyone that took it, and most of the class was out after the first couple of laps. By the end of it, only Izuku, Akira, Ida, and the frog-like girl remained. That was also where Izuku and Akira learned that Ida's quirk let him shift gears like a car. Then there was the seated toe touch, where Mina, a chartreuse-haired girl with teal and yellow eyes, the black-haired boy with strange elbows, and an elegant-looking blonde boy showed they could fold themselves over. The sit-ups test and standing side steps test after those were stamina-based, and found Izuku, Akira, the teen with 6 arms, and the blonde with the monkey's tail outlasting everyone. Then it was back to the ball throw. Now, despite the task being described as a ball throw, most of the class decided to take a few creative liberties with their approach. The onyx-haired girl from before decided to pop out a cannon from her arm before loading the ball in and shooting it out far. Ida threw the ball up before spinning around with his engines active before kicking it away. A raven-headed boy had a shadow monster come out of him and carry the ball away before throwing it. And Akira charged up every morsel of his quirk's energy into his right arm before sending it flying away, a shockwave emitting from his hand from the pure strength in his throw. And then there was Ochako. She just touched the ball before lifting it up and letting it float away into the sky. Judging by the score Aizawa had shown them, the class could only guess that it went past the atmosphere as well. That is absolutely broken, Akira said, looking up at where he last saw the ball with a flat face. Removing all influences of gravitational energy. Impressive, but such utter bullshit. Izuku shrugged. That's just quirks, Akira. He didn't say aloud that their quirks were more broken than anyone else's and opted for staying quiet. All right, last contestant. Aizawa started, throwing the ball at Izuku. Midoriya, step up to the circle and complete the trials for us. Izuku did as such, and was thinking of throwing it before remembering what happened with the grip test. Aizawa-sensei, how much force do you think this can take? The black-haired man heard his unsaid implication and waved him off. You don't have to worry about that. We had All Might test these himself, he explained. You're good. The greenette nodded and reeled back his arm before one more question popped into his head. Wait, what about the jacket? Izuku wasn't exactly enthusiastic about having to purchase another uniform if he could save it. No wasting money. This time, Aizawa didn't look so sure. Based on the power you've presented so far. No, I do not believe that your jacket will survive this throw. Izuku sighed, but nodded in acceptance before taking off his jacket and tying it around his waist. In doing so, he revealed that he only had a sleeveless black shirt that was very tight around his body and did absolutely nothing to hide his godly physique. The action made a certain pink-skinned girl blush wildly. Whoa, she felt herself heat up and had to take deep breaths to calm herself down. Yes, please. Her brain replaying the moment she kissed the greenette after he saved her at the exam didn't help at all. Luckily for her, the guys in the class were all focusing and hyping up Izuku for his throw. They had quite literally made a half circle around him and were cheering him on while the other girls had to deal with their own blushes, so she wasn't found out. You guys might want to brace yourselves. Izuku warned the guys around him as he reeled back his arm. The full 40% of one for all coursing through his entire body. Because this is gonna be big. The pure power running through the greenette made him glow like a mini sun, and the guys around him simply activated their own quirks to brace. Damn straight it's gonna be big. All you, bro. Come on, man, you got this. Send that thing flying. We'll be fine, don't hold back. Izuku actually almost teared up at the amount of support everyone was showing him before steeling his nerves and taking a deep breath. Please don't break. And heaving it forward with the force of an armada of cannons. The shockwave from the greenette's throw covered the entire field, and all the guys, despite having their quirks turned on, were blown back from the force of the wave. Akira was the only one that hadn't, and even he had skid back several meters. Even the girls got blown back, but they all caught themselves mid-air before landing gracefully on the ground. After taking a moment to regain their bearings, the class looked towards Aizawa for the score. However, their teacher said nothing as he was still watching the number on his tablet continue to climb. And climb. And climb. It took a few more moments before the device finally beeped, and Aizawa just decided to put up the greenette's result and the other top 4 in a hologram. Softball throw results. Ochako Uraraka, Infinity. Momo Yaoyorozu, 28.3 kilometers. Izuku Midoriya, 10.82 kilometers. Akira Hikaru, 17,219.9 m. Katsuki Bakugo, 1,032.0 m. And once more, the class was left in shock at the pure power their forest-haired classmate had within his body, and a very good-looking one at that. I think that went well, Izuku thought to himself, as One for All slowly reined itself back into its core. I wonder what placement I'll get. He grabbed his PE jacket as he walked back and quickly put it on, much to a certain pink student's disappointment. Once he was back, all the guys sans a small handful had surrounded Izuku and started lifting him up before throwing him in the air and shouting praises and jabs at him. The greenette would admit this to anyone. He did let a tear fall out of his eye at the action and finally felt a sense of belonging. Meanwhile, Aizawa was compiling all of the trial results on his tablet before organizing them into their placements. All right, boys, that's enough, he said with a small smile, getting them to stop immediately. I can't be bothered with actually explaining your results, so I'll just show them to you. And then the results were up. Quirk Apprehension Test Final Results. First place, Izuku Midoriya. Second place, Momo Yaoyorozu. Third place, Akira Hikaru. Fourth place, Katsuki Bakugo. Fifth place, Shoto Todoroki. Sixth place, Tenya Ida. Seventh place, Fumikage Tokoyami. Eighth place, Mizo Shoji. Ninth place, Koji Koda. 10th place, Mashiro Ajira. 11th place, Ijiro Kirishima. 12th place, Mina Ashido. 13th place, Ochako Uraraka. 14th place, Kyoka Jiru. 15th place, Suyu Asui. 16th place, Rikido Sato. 17th place, Yuga Aoyama. 18th place, Hanta Siro. 19th place, Denki Kaminari. 20th place, Toru Hagakure. Obviously, there were mixed reactions at the results displayed. Most of the class seemed overall fine with their scores, but couldn't help the feeling of disappointment when they saw a name above their own. None of them, however, felt as much dread as the girl in last place. She was a short, light-skinned girl with a round face decorated with wavy chartreuse-colored hair, dotted with pink specks that flowed down to just below her shoulders. The girl was currently crying her round, rainbow-colored eyes out in a group hug with Mina, Ochako, and the onyx-haired girl, Momo Yaoyorozu. However, Aizawa quickly went to put a stop to this. You can dry your tears, Hagakure. He started, putting away the results. You're not getting expelled. Not today anyway. The man's words gave pause to the chartreuse-haired girl, and she looked at her teacher in shock. Wait, you were lying to us? She asked, shock but mostly joy written on her features. Momo looked as though she was going to answer the question, but Aizawa didn't even give her the chance. No, of course not. I can expel any single one of you whenever I feel like, he said bluntly. Hell, I could probably just change my mind right now and actually expel you and a few others while I'm at it. His statement caused Momo to freeze, and her eyes widened as her mouth hung open. What? Aizawa ignored the onyx-haired girl and simply continued speaking. However, you all showed a great amount of potential today in these trials, he said sincerely. Keep that up and none of you will have to worry about expulsion. At the end of his talk, Hagakure had pulled the 3 other girls into an even tighter and bigger hug. Oh my god, guys, I get to say. She glowed brightly with an ethereal yellow lime light at her exclamation. I'm not going home. The action brought a large smile to most of the other students. All right. But not Aizawa, not on the outside at least. Get back into your formal uniforms and go back to class for your syllabus and introductions. His hair and scarf lifted up as his eyes glowed red again. Now. Which did its trick as the entire class rushed off to their changing rooms. Still got it. Meanwhile, hiding behind a wall, All Might had a large smile on his face filled with pride at Izuku and Akira's scores. That's my boys. I knew they'd do well. With his worries subsided, the man walked off, humming his own theme song as he strolled along. Class 1A. The entire body of 1A had gotten back into their classroom and sat in their seats at record time. Now that their teacher had so casually mentioned he could expel them at any moment. Even the seemingly calmer students had rushed and sprinted in and out of the changing rooms to get to their class in time. Evidently, they may have panicked a bit too much as Aizawa walked in almost a full minute after they had all sat down. Well, it's certainly pleasant to see you all get here on time, the black-haired man said, hiding an evil grin underneath his scarf. Keep this up. Yes, sensei. The class half-heartedly grumbled out, their real thoughts kept to themselves. You certainly gave us some motivation. Now before we discuss the class syllabus and what you'll all be learning this year. Aizawa started, stepping into his yellow sleeping bag and zipping it up. I'd like you all to come up here in seat order and introduce yourselves. Give your name, quirk, and a fun fact about yourself. He pointed to the elegant blonde in seat 1. Aoyama, you're up first. Before falling down and sleeping in the corner. BTW, there's going to be a few changes in quirks and attitudes. The blonde boy walked up to the podium in an elegant and regal manner, head held high and back straight. Bonjour to you all, my fellow classmates. He greeted them in a calm tone and had a small smile on his face. My name is Yuga Aoyama and my quirk is called Laser. It allows me to shoot powerful beams of blue energy from my palms. To accentuate his point, he held up his right arm and let a blue glow emit from his hand. Fun fact about me, I'm half French, half Japanese. Mina was up next and bounced up to the podium with a large smile. What's up, class? I'm Mina Ashido. She spoke with a cheery tone and a toothy smile. My quirk is called acid. It lets me secrete any acidic chemical or solution at different intensities from my entire body. It's actually why I'm pink. And fun fact. She moved to the side of the podium and did a backflip into the splits. I love to dance. Izuku walked up next, trying not to blush at the wink Mina sent him as they walked past one another. Hi, everyone. My name's Izuku Midoriya. He bowed before deciding the best thing to do was just explain very little. I have an energy-based stockpiling quirk, and I've only known about my quirk for a year. The disappointed looks were not missed by the greenette, but he briskly walked back to his seat. And Akira walked up to pull everyone's attention away from his friend. Heya, everyone. I'm Akira Hikaru. He greeted them joyfully, luckily having the effect he wished. My quirk is called Kai Control. It's just a quirk that gives me life force energy and lets me mess around with it to heal myself, other people, and a couple other things. However, the black-haired teen also decided that he got to take a jab at his friend since he covered for him. Fun fact about me and Izuku. We both love to play guitar. Ochako walked up next and ended up nervously floating over to the podium before settling herself down. Hiya, I'm Ochako Uraraka. She greeted in a sweet voice. That's what Akira thought at least. My quirk is zero gravity. It just lets me remove the effect of gravity of whatever I touch with all of my fingers on one hand. The girl ended up taking an involuntary step back at the shocked looks of a select few of her classmates before pressing on. Fun fact about me, I love matcha. The blonde with the brown furred monkey tail walked up in a very normal way next. Hello, I'm Mashiro Ejiro. He greeted everyone with a normal tone and normal expression. My quirk is called Tails. It's a mutation quirk with transformation aspects on it. His monkey tail came up as he spoke before turning into a furry, orange, foxtail. It just lets me change my tail into the tail of, well, anything. Fun fact. The tail went back to its monkey form. I like to study martial arts. The blonde with a black lightning streak in his hair basically ran up to the podium with a slide. Heyo, everybody, I'm Denki Kaminari. A flurry of yellow sparks danced along his body before they all dispersed into the air. My quirk is electrification. It lets me generate electricity, use it how I want, and let me absorb and neutralize all other lightning-based quirks. Unbeknownst to him, a number of his classmates decided to make a mental note of the last part of his statement. Fun fact about me, I'm single. He tried to be funny, but he was simply met with flat looks, causing him to slump back to his seat. Man. The teen with spiky red hair went up next, and made sure to pet Kaminari on his back. Hi, I am Ijiro Kirishima. He showed off his full set of shining, white, shark teeth when he smiled. My quirk is hardening. It lets me harden and kind of sharpen any part of my body. His arms came up and became jagged for a moment to accentuate his point. Fun fact about me, I love manly things. There were a few things to unpack at that statement. The boy with the mountain-shaped head was next to walk up, and he did so meekly, keeping his head down all the way to the podium. When he finally got there, he began to shakily sign his introduction to the class. Only a few students understood what he was saying, while the rest of the class looked confused. Luckily for him, Izuku and Akira both stood up and walked over before translating the other teen's introduction to everyone, the former speaking first. Everyone, this is Koji Koda. Izuku started. His quirk is animal. It lets him shift forms into any animal on land or sea. His eyes caught Koda signing something else, and they widened after his brain translated it. Wait, really? Fun fact about Koda. Akira continued. Knowing Izuku wouldn't continue after the last parcel of information the other teen gave them. He likes to do volunteer work at the vets on the weekends. Koda gave both Izuku and Akira a grateful smile before all three of them walked back to their seats. The thick-lipped teen walked up to the podium, shaking his short brown hair. Hi, class. My name is Rikido Sato. He greeted them with a large smile and putting his arms up before flexing them. My quirk is called Sugar Rush. It ramps up my strength and overall size whenever I ingest enough sugar. Fun fact about me, I like to bake. The white-haired boy with 6 arms walked up next. Hello, my name is Mizo Shoji. His voice came out of a mouth that suddenly appeared on the end of one of his hands. My quirk is called Dupli Arms. It lets me shift the end of either 6 of my hands into a mouth, an ear, or an eye. I can also make myself more arms and hands and create appendages on top of those. He spread his arms out, and it grew like a tree made out of arms before they went back to normal. Fun fact about me, I'm a minimalist. The next one up was the girl with short purple hair. Hey, everyone, I'm Kyoka Jiru. She shifted as she spoke, and had visible trouble standing in front of everyone. My quirk is called Heartbeat. It makes my body an echo chamber for the sound of my heart, and lets me shoot it out of any part of my body. Her face became a bit pink at the end of her explanation, and she was already halfway to her seat when she finished her fun fact. Fun fact, I'm also a musician. The black-haired teen with the strange elbows waltzed up to the podium next. Hey, everybody, I'm Hantasiro. He greeted everyone with enthusiasm and a smile. My quirk is called Tape. It gave me these tape dispensers in my elbows which I can use how I like. His eyes rolled up as if he was searching his brain for a fun fact. Fun fact. I like oranges and soy products. The teen with the raven head walked up next. Greetings, class. I am Fumikage Takoyami. His voice was low and his red eyes bore into all of them. My quirk is called Dark Shadow. A small shadow head popped out from his front as he said this. It allows me to summon this sentient shadow being here that will aid me in any of my tasks. The quirk waved at all of them before disappearing back into Fumikage's stomach. Fun fact about me, I enjoy dark places. Next was a stoic-looking boy with two-toned hair, right side white and left side red and heterochromatic eyes. Hello, my name is Shoto Todoroki. He greeted them in a flat tone and an equally flat expression. My quirk lets me produce ice from the right side of my body. I like cold soba. And he apparently decided to take after Izuku and give a quick, to-the-point explanation. Hagakure was the next to skip up the podium. Heyo, everybody. My name is Toru Hagakure. Her voice was as cheery as Mina's, and she was equally as bouncy. My quirk is called Photon Manipulation. It lets me control the light particles around me in a ton of different ways. The chartreuse-haired girl suddenly disappeared, causing almost everyone in the class to gasp. However, she quickly reappeared. Cool, right? Fun fact about me, I like caramel sweets. Bakugo brashly stormed up to the podium with a no-nonsense face on him. Alright, extras, listen and listen good cause I'm only saying this once. The class looked at him with a mixture of confusion and appallment. My name is Katsuki Bakugo. My quirk is called Explosion. It lets me secrete nitroglycerin-like swear from my body that I can ignite with my palms. He accentuated his point with a scream and a small explosion. Fun fact, I'm better than all of you. The frog-like girl who walked up next actually stopped for a good couple of seconds to just stare at Bakugo in confusion before moving up to the podium. "Hi, everybody, I'm Tsuyuasui, Hiro." She actually croaked at the end of her greeting. "My quirk is called Frog. As you can probably guess, it lets me do anything a frog can, Hiro. Fun fact, I like the rainy season and swimming." Ida was next up to the podium and marched up there like he was a knight in the King's Guard. "Greetings, my fellow students. My name is Ada Tenya." He accentuated every word of his sentence with a karate chop that made a few people laugh. "My quirk is called Engines. It has given me these engine-like appendages on my calves that allow me to enhance my speed." His chest puffed up, and he smiled widely. "A fun fact about me is that I am the younger brother to the turbo hero, Ingenium." Lastly, and thank God for that, this was getting repetitive, Momo regally walked up to the front of the class. "Hello, classmates. My name is Momo Yaoyorozu." She bowed as she greeted them before giving them all a shaky smile. "My quirk is called Creation. It allows me to create any non-organic substance I wish as long as I understand its atomic structure and have enough lipids in my body." Her statement gathered a shared thought between a few of her classmates, Akira and Bakugo being the biggest ones. "Oh, that's just fucked. Fun fact." The onyx-haired girl continued, oblivious to her shocked classmates. "I love tea." She hurried back to her seat. As soon as she sat down, Aizawa suddenly appeared in front of the podium without a sound, sleep bag off and hidden somewhere. "I suppose I should introduce myself as well to you all," he said with a tired tone before straightening himself. "My name is Shota Aizawa, Erasure Hero, Eraserhead." His black eyes began to glow a fierce red again, and he tilted his head slightly. "My quirk is called Erasure. It effectively allows me to turn off every single one of your quirks that isn't a mutation just by looking at you." The glow of his eyes kept up for a small moment filled with silence before he returned to normal. "Fun fact about myself, I like cats." Unbeknownst to him, Akira was inwardly freaking out. "Oh my, the Eraserhead is my teacher." He took deep breaths and tried his best to keep his outward composure. Gotta calm down, before ultimately giving up on doing it normally and letting his quirk do it for him. "Ah, that's better." Completely unaware of his students' inner turmoil, Aizawa turned on the class projector, and a timetable appeared on the screen. "All right, you're all acquainted with each other. Now we discuss the syllabus." The class audibly groaned.